1 minute. You don't work in the broadcast world, do you?
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Roll call, please.
Senator Cooper,
Here.
Senator Ellis, Senator Jones,
Excused.
Senator Rothfuss,
Excused temporarily, he's outside.
Representative Banks,
Excused.
Representative Conrad,
Here.
Representative Heiner,
Here.
Representative Knapp,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Lawley, Representative Tarver, Representative Western,
Excused.
Co-Chairman Burkhart,
Here.
Co-Chairman Dockstader.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Here. Okay, thank you. Just a couple of reminders. Keep it civil as we move forward. We'll keep things, the pace going rather quickly today and tomorrow. A lot to take care of. And I'm going to do something just a little bit different. While those listening in may not be able to hear this, if those in the audience would speak loud, I'd like just a brief introduction of everybody in the room here, starting to my left, please. Right there, second row. Go ahead, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Back under the cameras. Just continue on. Thank you. Thank you. Over to this side, Fred. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go back here. You. You, just your side. Very good. Next row. Next row. You got a lot going, Rusty. Go ahead. Okay. All right. Committee, anything before we start? Let's go ahead. Dean, introduce yourself. Welcome to the Minerals Committee. This is the start of Joint Minerals Business and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wonderful to be here. And thanks everyone for your attention this morning. I'm Scott Beaulieu, the fairly new Dean of the College of Business at University of Wyoming. I'm just over my first year. Came to the university from North Dakota State University, where I was Dean of Business for the past 6 years. Been loving every minute of the job. I think I might be leading just about any outside of energy industry stakeholders in the state in terms of mineral tours this past year. So it's been coal, let's see, Trona, oil, pretty much you can go down the list, and I've been in most communities and tried to spend time learning about this wonderful state. I appreciate the chance to visit with you all this morning and share with you what's happening in the College of Business very briefly, and then also tell you a little bit about a high impact center that we have that we feel is contributing to the mineral industry as well. So just a couple of minutes about the college. This information was in your packets too. We are an AACSB accredited business school within the university. Just 5% of business schools enjoy this status worldwide. We're very proud of that accreditation. Each day I get to go to work and serve about 1,400 students, a little over 1,000 at the undergraduate level, another 300 or so across different graduate programs. We have approximately 90 faculty and staff in the College of Business who call that work every day, but it's a tremendous honor serving students in the state. Right now, we are organized and finding tremendous growth in many of our different programs. We are working desperately to attract more accountants to the business school right now. And something we're hearing from industry over and over is we wish we could have double the accountants that we have coming out of the university. We're doing what we can. Believe it or not, accounting isn't the most attractive occupation. So we're trying to make accounting a little more attractive to our students and say it can be a really fun and fulfilling career, but people are hardwired for accounting at about age 12, and either you become an accountant or you hire an accountant. So we're working on that. We've heard from a number of accounting firms that if you could give me double the number of accountants, I could double the size of my operation. We're losing accounting business to other states. So a lot of merger and acquisition activity. Firms are being told go out of state because we simply don't have the bandwidth to help you. And that's really a loss to the state as well. So we're trying to help address workforce needs. And we see, the university has a slogan, the world needs more cowboys. We think that the state of Wyoming needs more cowboys in business for it to be a business-friendly state. So that's what we're driving day after day in the college. One program that we're particularly proud of in terms of recent growth is our MBA program. In the last 3 years, it has grown by 50%. We're serving 30 different states with our online MBA program. Picture professionals who are in their jobs, working full-time, taking a class here or there, just chipping away at nighttime, trying to finish their MBA and getting an added credential from the University of Wyoming. So really important to help people move up the corporate ladder and just make progress in what they're doing. I want to transition just real briefly to some projects that we've been doing in the last year or two that are just really helping inform sound decisions in communities and also in the industries that you are all here concerned about and representing. So if I may, we have a Center for Business and Economic Analysis, and in that there's a team of economists who are focused on tackling very applied state relevant research projects. So companies, cities, different entities come to them and say, here's the problem I need more analysis on. And we commission and we are paid for the work and provide them with independent analysis that's helping fuel sound business decisions around the state. And just a few of them, and the list is tremendously long of all the projects that they're doing, but just a few to highlight with you all. Right now, we're helping rare element resources working on demand scenarios for rare elements and trying to determine whether there's feasibility for this in the state of Wyoming. We're working with Project West on the economic impact of soda ash. This is a real messy one, but we're trying to help Cheyenne determine the cost benefit of expanding water to regions beyond the municipality. That will be interesting to see how it turns out. Close to home in Laramie, we're doing an economic impact study on Pilot Hill and what Pilot Hill recreation is meaning to the city of Laramie. We have an amenities index that can tell all of you in your different communities what amenities might be missing to make your communities more attractive. It's a list we haven't really shared publicly because someone's best and someone's worst, but if you want to ask us about it, we can certainly tell you what we've identified as pluses and minuses in your different communities. So picture this as educational support. How many paved miles of sidewalk do you have? How's fire and police? And each community gets a score and a ranking, and it's meant to help guide you in making decisions about where do we need to invest or improve our communities. So these are some of the things that CBEA is doing. We're helping with the CK Gold Mine and informing them on some of their decisions as they expand. And coming up next week, I'm guessing I will see many of you at the Governor's Business Forum. I'm being handed the really unenviable task of emceeing with Josh Durrell. And Josh is a genius. He's really fast on his feet. He's going to clobber me with the jokes on the emceeing role the first evening. But at the Governor's Business Forum, we'll be rolling out the first economic forecast for the state of Wyoming that we've conducted. So Dr. Ann Alexander we'll be releasing information on where we think the state of Wyoming is headed in the next year or so. I hope you all can be there and tune in for that. So just a lot of information that we're able to provide, and just want you all to know that we're there standing ready as a resource. If there are other businesses or communities that are looking for just top-notch economic analysis, we're involved in a retail sales tax analysis for Fremont County, and some other ones that that we could expand on in any kind of Q&A. So thank you for having me here today, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dean. More CPAs, and the Trona Patch needs more engineers. We got to get it all done. Thank you. Committee questions for our Dean. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Next week, the Tribal Relations Committees, we're looking at sales tax collection on the reservation. So if you have any information about that, what you're working on that you could provide to me, that would be, I think, helpful before next week. Thank you.
Dean?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, well, we're happy to get in touch.
Okay, further questions from the committee? Go ahead, JT. Representative, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to hear you need more accountants from the College of Business. I'll be graduating from the University of Wyoming this December, and I just wanted to say I can't say enough good things about the staff within the College of Business, and all the faculty as well, who've helped me along my way as I tried to achieve my degree. So we definitely need more bean counter.
Very good. Wish you all the best with your degree on that. Let's go Representative Heiner and then Representative Conrad in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean Bueller, could you give us an idea of what the enrollment has been like for the past 10 years for the College of Business? Has it been going up, going down, staying about the same?
Dean?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yes, it is. The College of Business enrollments have, at the undergraduate level, flattened a little bit and have declined a little. In comparison to the university as a whole, we've held up really strong. I think this has to do primarily with just the value we offer, and parents and students who are saying we want a degree with a high return on investment. So our students are going right into the workforce. They're placing into jobs and positions at very high rates with strong salaries. And that's something that I think is compelling to 18-year-olds or their parents for sure, when you're thinking about what is the debt load I'll be taking on and what does the opportunity look like for me. We have a couple of very applied programs that are placing at nearly 100%. A program in professional selling that's training students, 21-year-olds, to get comfortable trying to sell. And there's about half of all jobs in America right now have a sales component to them, but we typically don't train for this. We're not training this in accounting. We're training you to be an accountant. We're training you to be an economist, in my case. This sales curriculum is designed to make you uncomfortable and get you out of your comfort zone and try selling things as a 21-year-old. The students come out with tremendous confidence and they're getting multiple jobs on the spot. So undergraduate, very stable. The graduate enrollments have just exploded in the last several years.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up to that question, what percentage of your students are under scholarship?
Dean?
Goodness, Mr. Chairman, it is most. I don't have the data in front of me. I think the impact of programs to support Wyoming students are just tremendous in terms of the students who are on scholarship. I'm a first-generation student, and yesterday was first-gen day nationally. 1/3 of Wyoming students are first-generation students, so the first in their families to attend a four-year university, and 1/3 of university students as well are Pell eligible, which means they're most definitely on financial aid. I think the scholarship percentage has to be extremely high.
Good. Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean Bueller, just a quick question as regards to retention. How are your retention rates as relates to your staff?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Very good question. Our staff and our culture in the College of Business are amazing. So the culture that we have going, and I have one of my staff members here, is among the best, I think, on the campus and in business schools. I visit many other business schools around the country, and it is a great team that we have. They're having fun. They're extremely motivated. They're happy with their work. We are working hard to remain competitive and doing some things that maybe aren't keeping up with the cost of living, but are making it an environment where they're really proud of their work and enjoying being there. Last week, we had something, we allowed them leave for a couple of hours on Friday afternoon, and they participated in the Staff Olympics. And it was just an absurd series of team building exercises and kickball tournaments. And I guess there was some kind of pin the tail on the dean contest that they were involved in. And it all is just meant to just really help drive culture. So we have not had a lot of staff loss in the last couple of years. Faculty is a very competitive market where you're trying to compete with the best talent around the country. And, it's very much like recruiting in football. If they're good, they're at risk of getting picked off. And thankfully, one thing we have going into college is tremendous generosity from donors that's allowing us to be extremely competitive, so that if I'm at risk of losing someone, I have different flavors of private money to try to keep them and make a run at them.
Further questions? Go ahead.
Chairman, is that something you would consider on behalf of Joint Minerals, a Olympics?
Olympics? Business oriented. All right. Go ahead, Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean, I understand you're launching a new venture MBA program. Could you explain that a little bit and tell us what kind of interest you're having in it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's something we're extremely excited about. We have about 8 students in it right now, but it's its first year. And so we have 3 flavors of an MBA, just to back up for a second. So we have an in-person MBA that has about 40 students in it. It's really geared towards professional development of our students, soft skill development. It's a lot of undergraduate students who are continuing on with their studies. So engineers who need some leadership training or some smoothing out around the edges. That's kind of our target in that program. We have the online that is serving massive numbers of students who are adult learners primarily, who are just trying to continue in their jobs. And then there's this third group, which is venture MBA students. These are students who have startups that they're working on right now. They're taking their ideas and they're trying to figure out what to do next with them. They need mentorship, they need time, and they need a safe space to be experimenting with their ideas. And what our program is doing is giving them that. They're working towards their degree. We're giving them credit for experiential components towards that degree. They have an assigned business mentor. And an ask of many of you would be, if you know people who might be interested in mentoring advanced business students, we have the talent. They need a really hands-on mentor to help them. And that program is aiming to give them an MBA as they hopefully take off and launch their company. So thank you very much for that question. We're excited about it.
Good. Pretty good. Okay. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So Dean, a couple things first. The first quarter of the year, my account becomes one of my best friends. And my daughter is an NDSU graduate. So
Oh my goodness.
she didn't want to follow her brothers through UW and always be the younger sister. So with all the business courses and that, are students able to concentrate in an area? For example, I mean, we're the energy producing capital of the world right here. That's the motto of the city. What are you doing specifically for those who want to go into, say, technical areas other than banking or working for one of the big accounting firms? Is there the opportunity for those students to get that experience, say, directly in business?
Dean?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Absolutely. So we are there to provide first and foremost a core business knowledge in different business disciplines, but our curriculum is very lean. We receive feedback constantly that you have a lot of room to demand or require more classes in your curriculum if you want to. So if you want to just deepen the business curriculum, you can. We intentionally do not do that because we want our students to partner and have experiences in engineering or in the School of Energy Resources or in other areas where we have these amazing land grant opportunities for them to get more exposed to the state. And then within the College of Business, we have an economics program that has energy economics in it. They have a strong capability and reputation in environmental economics. So we're able to do some in-house, but we have many partnerships around the university with educators who are strong in areas important to the state. I moved from NDSU down here for the better weather, by the way, Mr. Chairman, and it's 10 degrees warmer every day in the winter. So
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Dean, you indicated, people want to stay in the state and the information you gave us said that about 60% of the students want to stay in Wyoming after they graduate. We're kind of limited on, say, business entities in the state that are looking at economics, accounting, and that sort of thing. Anything the state can do to increase that ability for students to stay in the state when they graduate?
Sir?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a really good question. It's complicated. We're trying to do what we can by bringing as many potential employers in the state to the university. We have Fridays where they're there with donuts and a lot of handouts for students, and it's informational. And we tilt heavily in the direction of welcoming Wyoming employers to the College of Business. What we're trying to do is get the employer to be the very front face of opportunities that exist in Casper and Riverton and other areas in the state, to say these are great communities and you ought to come up here and experience them. So that's what we're doing organically. There are programs to encourage students to visit different communities, and we're trying to do a lot of that just on our own. We send every MBA student goes to Jackson for a leadership summit in the fall. It's to get them out of the building and around and to stop for ice cream on the way to Jackson and see the amazing state that's out there, and hopefully think about possibilities of staying. But it's indeed just something you have to be intentional and put a lot of effort in.
Thank you. Further from the committee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean, I want to talk just a moment about recruitment from Wyoming high schools. And I spent a good time with high schools in my district and what's going on there. And as we kind of look at, how are we really preparing students for the jobs of the future? So can you talk a little bit about your recruitment efforts, whether you've got a new strategy about that, ways of reimagining that with students and helping them understand some of the opportunities in the College of Business at UW and how that could relate to them and their dreams for the future to stay here in Wyoming?
Go ahead, Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there's a comprehensive university focus on recruitment right now, and there's some significant money being put into those efforts. It includes marketing, it includes analysis of what programs have growth potential. The College of Business fares very well in that analysis, by the way, because we need to be investing in areas that are vital to the state and then areas that students, in fact, want to study. And that is encouraging to see that we're really trying to focus on enrollment growth and recruitment. I think that at our level in the College of Business, we do things a little bit differently. Every unit on campus is a little different. We're really focused on making sure that as soon as a student indicates interest in us, that they're getting concierge service. And we have a team of about 13 people who are there to advise and support our students in the College of Business. If they want to study business, we have a team of 13 who are there to help from the very moment that they show interest all the way until they're done and have a job. It's a student success center where it's all built in to staff who are committed and dedicated to those students. So we have taken all of that responsibility away from professors and we've put it on a professional staff. And I think that this is a move that makes tremendous sense. Professors are great. You all may have had one or two really good professors in your experiences, but on a day-to-day basis, it's not what they're there to do. And we've outsourced that to a team who really cares about it. And so it's showing up in our enrollments being stronger in relative terms. It's showing up in pretty solid retention rates for us too. And that's our secret sauce in the College of Business, but we're really excited about what the university's doing as well to just improve the message and try to make people aware of the tremendous value that University of Wyoming offers.
Representative follow-up. Good. All right, we're good. Before we open in public comment, Dean, and you kind of covered it. I take it there's a lot of interaction to make sure that our graduates have job opportunities out there. Is there anything else we should be doing to make that connection across the state? I was sitting in a group in an energy meeting, listening to some of our graduates, postgraduate work in their masters, and they were talking about going to nearby states because of cities. But I think we overlook the opportunities that come in our small communities across the state. Are we making those connections? Are we making sure that there's an opportunity for our graduates to stay that way in our small communities?
Mr. Chairman, I think there is, and I think we have to just continue to be working at it and quite intentional. So we were at a Wyoming Taxpayers Association meeting a couple of weeks ago, and several of my interns in the College of Business are supporting Wyoming Taxpayers Association, and they're amazingly talented. And one of the key hurdles I think that we all have to get over is just figuring out ways that we can plug our students in and get them into internships and opportunities in your communities as early as possible. A lot of that is going to be in the summertime because they're going to be in Laramie during the year, but thinking about how do we plug them in, because the evidence is overwhelmingly points to if they intern somewhere with you all, they will in all likelihood give you a chance in that first job as well.
Thank you. I think there's a great opportunity there. I think of a person that's moved into a small community at the same time as I did to run an accounting extension office, an accounting office. He got involved in the community, and now he's the CEO of a major power company out in the far west. So the opportunities are there to expand too. All right. Any other further questions before we open up public comment? Okay, public comment. Being none, anything on the Zoom? On this topic only? Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Appreciate you coming, and we're going to contact you for some visits out to the far west, okay?
Please do. Thank you. Yep.
Public Utilities, Public Service Commission. Who is our representative there? Gentlemen, you're up. Before we start, just a reminder on the rate cases. This isn't to take testimony on any rate case changes. This is background. There are plenty of other committees to take that testimony and that work. This is specific to your work. So we're not taking testimony on rate cases. That cover it, Co-Chair?
Mr. Co-Chair, I think so. In fact, Co-Chair and I have talked, if you want to bring up the current rate case with Rocky Mountain Power, you'll be ruled out of order in the committee. That's not why we're here. This is an educational program for the committee. Everyone has had their opportunity to state their position on that in numerous meetings. So just wanted to set that up beforehand, and for the people who are on Zoom, not to belittle anybody's public testimony, but that's not the reason and not the topic of discussion here.
Thank you. Proceed, gentlemen. Introduce yourselves and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, good morning. My name is Mike Robinson. I'm a commissioner with the Public Service Commission. And today we're following up on the presentation that was made at your last meeting in July. We did not get through our slides at that meeting, and so I'm going to begin where we left off. And that is with Western-wide initiatives and issues. And the first slide is about gives you a map of the transmission, the bulk. What's that? Page 19, sorry. So this gives you a map of the bulk Western interconnection. So there are 3 main interconnections in the United States: the Eastern, the Western, and ERCOT, which is in Texas. Now, they don't exist in isolation. There are connections between them, but they are limited. So there are about 136,000 miles of transmission lines in the Western Interconnect. There are 2 really main features that distinguish the Western Interconnect from the Eastern, and that the main one is that you have remote generating resources and just that are distant from major population centers. So the lines are very long. They take power from, for example, Wyoming to Salt Lake City, all the way to the West Coast. And then there are other lines that take the hydro resources from the Pacific Northwest south to California. And in fact, there is some of that comes into Wyoming. Lower Valley Energy gets most of its power from hydro. So it's much more different than the east because of density for one thing. And then in the power, electricity generally in the west flows south and west. As the slide says, it's kind of a donut. The next slide shows the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, which is a nonprofit or a corporation, and who's tasked by Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to ensure that the bulk electric system remains reliable. They create standards, enforce those standards, and they do reliability studies. And they try to coordinate with utilities and other regional entities. And on the next slide, another current initiative is the Western Resource Adequacy Program. This has been started within the last 5 or 6 years to address concerns about adequacy in the West. There are a number of utilities who are participating in this initiative, including Rocky Mountain Power. And so RAP has been approved by FERC, and it is currently, for example, Southwest Power Pool, which is attempting to establish a market in the West, is using the Western Resource Adequacy Program for the adequacy portion of their market. The next slide shows what are regional transmission organizations. So this is something of a hot topic. For years, there's been a number of initiatives to get RTOs into the West. They are fairly common in the East. Not all the East is covered in an RTO, but the majority of it is. So RTOs are FERC jurisdictional nonprofit entities. Membership in an RTO is voluntary. Now, I'll caveat that by noting that the states of Colorado and Nevada have passed laws that mandate their jurisdictional utilities join an RTO by 2030. Whether that's can happen or not, I guess we'll see. But an RTO is, if you think of it like an air traffic controller, an RTO doesn't own anything, but they manage the grid system. So for all of its members. So it manages the flow of the electricity on it. They run markets to clear energy sales, and they have extensive and detailed tariffs that address all aspects of that, from the costs to how the market works, how it's cleared, how it's paid, who's paid, when they're paid. And then for governance, every RTO, they have to be an independent entity under FERC's rules. And they usually have, in addition to their independent board, they have a number of other committees that help with governance. And every RTO has a committee composed of state public regulatory commissioners. And so even in an RTO, state PSCs have a role to play. They generally have a vote on issues and on tariffs. And while it depends between each RTOs, they operate differently. Some give more power to the state committees than others do. The next slide is the California Independent System Operator, which we call a CAISO. An independent system operator performs many of the same functions as an RTO. The main differences are the size of the footprint, pricing of some services, and an ISO is not a full RTO. For one thing, for like the California Independent System Operator, the board of directors of CAISO are nominated by the governor of California and approved by the Senate. So CAISO currently does not meet the independence requirement of FERC to become an RTO. There have been numerous initiatives to resolve that, but none have succeeded at this point. So Kaizo does administer a market called the Western Energy Imbalance Market. It's a real-time wholesale energy trading market. And Rocky Mountain Power is a participant in that market. And Kaizo is currently developing a new market that will be in addition to the EIM and supplement it. It's an extended day ahead market. The proposed start date for that was recently pushed back to 2026. And on the next slide, we have the Southwest Power Pool. So you can see on the map that they have entities participating. So that currently SPP is what they call their phase one for this. They are working on developing the tariffs for all aspects of a market. We have been actively participating in some of those task forces, both monitoring, and in at least one task force, we have an actual vote. And so I just wanted to also note that SVP, two things about Southwest Power Pool. They have another initiative, which the name of it escapes me right now, but the effect of it is that they have opened up their existing RTO, which is mostly in the Eastern Interconnect, along, I believe they in something like 10 states, from Oklahoma north to the Dakotas to Iowa, Arkansas. They have opened that up to membership for utilities in the West. Two G&Ts who serve co-ops, Basin and Tri-State, have elected to join. Now they also have utilities in the Eastern Interconnect, so they've already had a role with SPP. Now they're formally joining, and they're joining their western part of their operations into that. That doesn't directly affect us because Basin and Tri-State are not jurisdictional to the commission. As of right now, I do not know of any jurisdictional utilities who are looking at that option. The other thing I wanted to say about SVP, they've been upfront and said that their long-term goal is the creation of an RTO in the West. And the next slide is, so what is on the horizon for electricity? And the next slide. So, this is just a little picture graph of the traditional model of delivering electricity, which runs from a power plant. A transformer steps up the voltage for transmission. It's sent along the transmission, usually for very long distances. Then it's stepped down again before it's delivered to your house, your business, or whoever consumes the electricity. The next slide is just, again, another title slide, Changing Reality. Slide after that. So this shows the electricity rates in the country. This is as of January of this year. Wyoming currently, overall, considering the state as a whole, enjoys the lowest rates in the country. I think we may actually be 49th now, but I would have to check on that. And then the next slide talks about how do we maintain reliability in the face of changing peak demand and an evolving generation resource mix resulting from market forces and policy pressures. One thing I wanted to add about this is the policy pressure thing. We have gotten a lot of comments about policies adopted in particular by states on the West Coast and how that influences us. It does have an influence. It is, in my opinion, the commission has tools for addressing those kind of pressures. The pressure we don't really have a tool for addressing is those that are caused by policies adopted by the Environmental Protection Agency, regional haze, ozone transport. And this is my opinion, those have a far more significant impact on Wyoming than anything the West Coast states do. And our ability to directly do anything with those policies is rather limited. The state has, through the Attorney General's office, the ability to engage in litigation, and Department of Environmental Quality has, a relationship with EPA and a process that they can work with them. But as far as the Public Service Commission is concerned, we're kind of spectators on the EPAs. So while we follow them and do anything, to the extent we feel like we need to act, we've made comments in front of the EPA, but usually we have to work through DEQ or some other agency. And then the next slide, I didn't make this slide, but I believe this is, I don't know if this is Rocky Mountain Power specific. I think it might be. It just shows the proposed additions and reductions in the type of resources. Now, again, I'm going to offer a comment on IRPs that my experience with IRPs is that they tend to become outdated almost as soon as they're issued. All you have to do with, I'll use Rocky Mountain Power as an example. You go back to their 2019, which, talked a lot about coal plant closures. It had nothing in it about nuclear. And I think both of those landscapes have changed since that IRP. So I guess my suggestion is take IRPs with a grain of salt, because the real world, IRPs are model-based. The real world often doesn't care what your model says. And that runs us to the end of the slides. And if anybody has any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take, do you want your fellow commissioners to speak first, or questions to you now?
I can go whatever the committee's pleasure is.
Sir,
Mr.
would you
Chairman.
like to add to what he said?
Co-chairman Dockstader, I don't need to add anything at this point, but if there are some questions that
Okay,
need to be directed in my
just
direction.
didn't want to
I'll
leave you
address
out.
those.
So I see Representative Conrad and then to Representative Heiner. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Chairman Robinson, thank you as well. Help me out, clarify, at least my understanding, what is the advantage? I know that the SPC's mission, more importantly, our objective is to expand RTOs. What is the incentive? And obviously the analogy with the air traffic controllers to make more efficiency of that usage. What is the incentive for companies respectively to join the SPP? And is that engagement materializing into additional membership? And what, is there any negatives associated with that?
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad. So some of the benefits from participating in an RTO is that generally utilities that operate transmission systems, they're balancing authority, and anytime electricity needs to be transported from their balancing authority to an adjoining one, they have to negotiate a bilateral agreement between the two. What an RTO does is eliminates those bilateral agreements, and you just go into a market. So it consolidates everything. It's kind of an economies of scale concept. And so that the theory is markets, energy purchased through a market is cheaper that way. The downsides of an RTO is that you're giving up some control of your system. And so it adds another entity you have to go through. It adds a process that can be expensive. You have to hire people, and so there is a cost to it too.
Representative Conrad, you good? Okay, on to Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Robinson, I'd want to go back to this last slide you have for IRP total capacity expansion by technology. And I'm sure for the Public Service Commission, the IRP is very, very important because it kind of sets the blueprint for the next decade, what's going to happen in our power grid and electricity. And in this slide, it shows solar as being the overall driver for expansion with 86 gigawatts. But then I see distributed PV as 33 gigawatts, almost 34 gigawatts. So the difference between solar and distributed PV, I'm assuming distributed PV means rooftop solar for homeowners and things like that. But many of the utilities in Wyoming, when there was legislation proposed to change the net metering for rooftop solar, they supported changing that to reduce the net backs to the customer, to the rooftop solars, homeowners per se. They thought that the homeowners were getting overly compensated for the rooftop solar. But now I'm seeing in this IRP that I don't know who generated this, but they're saying that that is a fundamental part of their future generation is rooftop solar. So there's a dichotomy that I'm missing something here. They're saying we don't want to pay the residential customers as much for rooftop solar, but then they're saying this is what's going to drive the third largest growth in our capacity. So why the difference there? What do they support rooftop solar as it shows here, or do they want rooftop solar to be more to pay less compensation to the homeowners that install this?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Robinson, go ahead.
Representative Heiner. Well, first I want to note, I believe these IRP numbers for Rocky Mount Power as a whole, so across 6 states. So much of the solar would be Utah and other points west. As far as, I can't speak to any particular utility's position on rooftop solar. From a commission's perspective, we certainly, support what, we've tried to do through legislation. There are lingering issues on potential subsidization and, what the proper rate would be. Those are still trying to work themselves out. And I think perhaps IRPs tend to be somewhat aspirational. They're projecting, they generally project 20 years into the future. So the further out you get, the more the less it's tied to today, and so it may, I don't know if it will reach this kind of level. I don't know what to say other than, this is an ongoing issue.
Is it Heiner?
Follow up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with the IRP, and we understand that regulated utilities, they have a ROI, a guaranteed rate of return. So the money they spend, they generate a profit. We can call it a profit. So naturally, the more money they spend, the more profit they make. So with the IRP that we approve, how much input does the PSC have to a utility before they build something? Say they want to build a multi-billion-dollar transmission line. Do they have to be, does that project have to be approved before it's actually built? Or do they come to the PSC after the fact and say, oh, okay, we built this power line, this transmission line, we would like to roll that into our rates? Is it before the fact or after the fact that the PSC becomes involved in those decisions?
Commissioner?
Chairman, Representative Heiner, couple of preliminary things. Utilities, we authorize a rate of return for utility, and that's only an opportunity. Turn that, there are no guarantees. So if they want to reach that, they have to manage their expenses and costs. The other thing is they don't earn a rate of return on all their expenses, only their capital investment. And then as far as projects, yes, generally they have to come in for a certificate of public convenience and necessity. And so what that process does is it looks at the need for the project. Is it necessary for the public? And when we issue a CPCN, they are explicitly conditioned that you can, give you a certificate, you can build, but there's no guarantee of rate recovery of anything. You have to come back into a rate case and justify your expenses for that project.
Okay. One more, and then your colleague, did I see? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up to that, so these large transmission lines that are multi-billions of dollars to export our electricity to other states to the west, those were all pre-approved by the PSC before they were built. Is that correct, Mr. Robinson?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henning, there's a distinction. So if the transmission line is being built by a utility we regulate, the answer is yes. But if it's being built by, like, for example, a merchant wind farm, we do not regulate them. They are a wholesaler. So we don't have anything to do with their projects. They do not, we do not approve them or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So just out of curiosity, how's that need determined? As mentioned, power lines going out, I would say, as Wyoming's an exporter of energy. How's that need determined for Wyoming?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp. So need necessarily is a broad term. It can be, population growth. It can be expected increased demand for electricity. It can be reliability and redundancy for the network. So all of those things in some portion or another in each particular, and it'll differ from each project. So those are the kind of things we look at.
Thank you for the questions committee. Co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Commissioner, I've read over the study that Colorado PSC did on joining an RTO. I found it a little odd that almost every subcategory indicated it was a bad idea, and the final decision was it was a good idea. So to me, they appeared to have had an answer to a question before they even started. Also, in looking over Colorado's green energy portfolio, if you look at that, it almost implies that the only way they can meet their requirements is to force Wyoming utilities into an RTO that benefits them. Would you care to comment on any of that?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would say is that I would note that our rules, and I believe it's Chapter 3, Section 26F, subject check, but I believe that is the section. It requires, among other things, it requires any jurisdictional utility that surrenders any of its operational control over any of its assets to come to us for permission. So it is the Commission's view that if a utility decides it wants to join an RTO, they need to file an application with us.
Thank you for the comment. Questions, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So forgive my naivety, but I was hoping you might be able to clarify a little bit on the interplay between the multi-state protocols that we're involved in and how the interplay with some of these RTOs, which controls, that kind of stuff.
Go ahead. Your turn.
Co-Chairman Dockstader, Representative Western, I'm gonna probably be able to tackle part of this question, and then I may turn to the commissioner to wrap it up. But the interplay, I think, is the multi-state protocol is really a outline or a formula that the states have gotten together with Rocky Mountain Power to try to determine where the demand is and how, based on several factors, that there are costs and how things should be allocated as far as paying for the system. And there are things that currently are considered more of a system asset, and transmission right now is one of those things. And then there are others that we're looking at from a situs perspective, which is generally means that if a capital improvement is made to benefit, let's say, I mean, Oregon would be the most logical place to talk about, that the lion's share, if not all of the costs of those situs capital improvements would be borne by the Oregon ratepayers. It's important to note in the multi-state protocol that it is not binding on any one commission from any state. It retains all of the authorities under, in our case, Wyoming law, that the commission has to exercise its jurisdiction to make those determinations in a rate case, to decide how much of a capital improvement actually benefits Wyoming ratepayers and adjust the allocation accordingly. Currently, that allocation for Wyoming, as most of you know, is at about 15%. It's actually a little bit lower than that, but there is the ability to make adjustments upward or downward. I would expect it wouldn't go upward because we really aren't above 15% of the system. But if, for instance, you have, even though it's considered a system, capital addition, transmission lines would historically fall under, the 15%. But I think we're seeing that that's changing, that the allocation is becoming much more of a dynamic number that the MSP contemplates can be adjusted based on who's using that particular asset. How that interplays with the RTO is where I'm a little stumped on the question. But it is, and I believe, an important issue if we were to get an application where a utility would want to release a certain amount or turn over a certain amount of its operational control to an RTO. I think that is something that would have to be examined on a case-by-case basis. And that's where that would occur. And I don't believe that we've seen that yet. So I'd turn this over to the commissioner to see if he has anything to add.
Follow up on that? Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Western. So it's my understanding with RTOs, and with the caveat that this is still a learning process for me, because but that RTOs have used a system somewhat similar to the multi-state protocol, and that there's a cost allocation among the participating utilities, and that there can be transmission projects done that within the context of the RTO by one particular utility, and the cost spread among others, depending on how their formula works. But that utilities still retain the ability to do their own projects outside of the RTO.
Representative Western, that cover it for you? Okay. Here and then there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, we talked about the multi-state protocol. That is only, am I correct, for Pacific Corp. It is not all power producers in all of the states. Am I correct?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhardt, yes.
Thank you.
Wait down here and then.
Thank you.
Okay, are you related to that point? Okay, let's really quick, Senator Roth, let's step in.
And it's the only multi-state protocol that is affecting Wyoming. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Representative. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your slide about changing reality and what you had after that, I kind of want to focus on the future right now. Obviously, you explained, I think, pretty well how there's a lot of changing dynamics right now, and the things that are being done, outside of your area, but by others that will affect what you do, and in terms of your commitment for the citizens of Wyoming. So what, as you look forward, are you looking at to try to make sure again that you can fulfill your obligation first and foremost to the citizens of Wyoming. What are you going to do in this changing reality? I guess is the question I'm trying to understand.
Commissioner.
Chairman, Representative Lawley. We, all three of us commissioners participate in these regional forums. We've kind of divided among us the different aspects of it. And so we stay actively participant in it. We have started to develop a regional section within our agency. We got permission for one employee, who we now have, whose entire focus is on these types of things: FERC, SPP, CAISO, Western Interconnect, all the issues. That's their job. We coordinate with with the governor's office, with Department of Environmental Quality, other state commissions. So right now, what we're trying to do is to stay active and, try to work towards a solution on some of these things that works for Wyoming.
Okay, do it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many other states that you work with regionally are also primarily exporters of power? Just curious.
Go ahead. I'm curious too.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, I don't know that off the top of my head. I do believe Montana's a net exporter, but there may be some other ones like Idaho. But yeah, I can't tell you right off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. All right, committee, anything else? Let's take public comment on this before we go. Anybody from the audience for the PSC? Anybody on the Zoom? We have one. Go ahead. Please identify yourself. Not there. Going once. Do they have a name? Going twice. All right, we're moving forward. All right, thank you. Gentlemen, appreciate it. We've got Rocky Mountain Power on the list, but I think we're going straight into the bill. Checking with Rocky Mountain Power. Do you have anything? Right, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Once again, Rick Kaysen with Rocky Mountain Power. Do not have anything, but we do have representatives of the company, subject matter experts available remotely as needed.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being on hand in person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, let's go into the bill then, draft bill. Ryan, do you want to present this to us?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, 24 LSO 181 low carbon reliable energy standards amendments. The committee requested this bill after Black Hills presented proposed amendments to 2020 House Bill 200. This bill draft amends requirements and deadlines, as well as rate recovery mechanisms for the adoption and implementation of low carbon energy standards by public utilities in Wyoming. The staff comment on page 2 just notes that I've included the entirety of that previous bill, 2020 House Bill 200. So it's the entirety of 3718 101 and 102 in the bill draft. Some of those provisions are not amended. They're just there for reference, and anything that is not amended would be removed from the final bill draft. So then, Mr. Chairman, moving on to page 3, line 7, this is a definition of low carbon. Currently, low carbon is defined as electricity that is generating using CCUS technology that produces carbon dioxide emissions of not more than 650 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour of generated electricity, averaged over 1 calendar year. This bill draft would change that definition of low carbon to mean electricity generated using CCUS that reduces not less than 75% of carbon dioxide emissions per megawatt hour, averaged over 1 calendar year from either an existing coal-fired generation facility or is allowed and defined by section 45Q, which is the carbon oxide credit for the sequestration and utilization of carbon dioxide. The staff comment on the top of page 4 just notes a couple of considerations for the committee that the committee may wish to consider. And first is how that 75% reduction in the definition of low carbon is measured. So whether a baseline needs to be set, and if so, what that baseline is and where it starts from, whether the reduction in CO2 is a reduction from the previous year or for some specified point in time. And then in the second part of that definition, so back on page 3, line 18, what is meant by reducing carbon dioxide emissions as allowed by section 45Q, and how the Public Service Commission would determine whether a utility's actions to pursue the 45Q credit complies with the low carbon generation requirements of this article. Then, Mr. Chairman, I would move to page 5. This is the provision of the current law that requires the Public Service Commission to establish the low carbon generation standards. What this will say is on page 5, lines 4 and 5, a public utility, and it inserts serving more than 10,000 Wyoming Electric customers. So currently it's any public utility that is subject to these requirements and standards. This bill would limit that to utilities that only serve at least 10,000 Wyoming customers. And then the public utility is required to generate a specific percentage of electricity that is dispatchable and reliable from an existing coal-fired generation facility or an equivalent new coal-fired generation facility. And the staff comment on page 5 is just a note in terms of whether an equivalent new facility needs to be defined or not. I'm not sure that's clear from the current draft, what that means. Then on page 5, line 26, this is a change that extends the date of implementing the low carbon standard from 2030 to 2038. On page 6, line 13 is a technical correction that the Public Service Commission proposed at the July meeting, and it's just striking standards, and so it just requires them to establish intermediate requirements. Then on page 6, line 19, current law requires the public utility to demonstrate compliance with the low carbon standards in every integrated resource plan that the utility submits to the Public Service Commission. This would change it to require a public utility to file an annual report with the commission that outlines the steps that the utility has taken in the previous calendar year to achieve the standards. Then moving on to page 9. These provisions that begin on page 8 and continue on page 9 concern rate recovery associated with the implementation of these low carbon energy standards. And on page 9, line 23, this draft adds to provide that recovery costs that are related to securing non-utility funding, exploration of carbon reduction technologies, the implementation of pilot projects, due diligence studies and reports, feasibility studies, front-end engineering design studies, geological studies, and tax and financing studies are part of that rate recovery that is authorized under the current law. Then on page 10, lines 22 and 23, the Public Service Commission currently is required to promulgate rules to ensure that public utilities are progressing toward the low carbon energy standards. This would insert language that limits that rulemaking authority to require public utilities to file reports to ensure that the utilities are satisfactorily progressing toward those standards. And the staff comment just notes that that kind of shift in the limitation on rulemaking. Page 11, line 23, rather than the Public Service Commission reporting to the legislature at large on the implementation of these standards and the execution, it would require the commission, the Public Service Commission, to report to this committee and the Joint Corporations Committee. And then page 12 is rulemaking authority for the Public Service Commission, and it would be a split effective date with the rulemaking effective immediately. The remaining changes effective July 1, 2024. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions.
Committee questions? Committee questions? All right, Mr. Co-Chair,
Go ahead if somebody else has.
you're up. It's all yours.
Okay. So. Mr. Chairman, I guess some of my questions would also be aimed at the utilities, one being the page 5, starting on line 4, serving more than 10,000 Wyoming electric customers. I guess my question is, and maybe the utilities are here, so come on up. Do we have utilities in Wyoming that serve only less than 10,000 customers?
All right. Black Hills, you're on the list anyways.
Yeah.
Which one of you are the chosen spokes?
Yes, this is kind of a bill recommended by Black Hills, so they're going to be on the spot for a lot of this.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Co-Chairman, David Bush with Black Hills Energy. With me today is Mark Lux, Vice President of Power Delivery and Engineering Services, and Derek Silba, who's our Director of Power Engineering I'm screwing that up, Power Delivery and Engineering Services. Are experts on carbon capture and what our efforts are with House Bill 200. To answer Co-Chairman Burkhart's question, yes, this provision in the bill is geared towards our Black Hills Power customers that are in the Newcastle area. They are served by our South Dakota utility, Black Hills Power. Black Hills Power has 2,600 customers, I think, ish, that are served in Northeast Wyoming. Under the statute now, those 2,600 customers could potentially be on the hook to pay for carbon capture on their own. Carbon capture technology from our research is roughly $500 million for one of our units. Neil Simpson 2 is our unit that's here in Gillette that serves Black Hills Power customers in South Dakota and in the Newcastle area. Our Cheyenne customers are part of Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power, a different utility. Umbrella, Black Hills Energy, but they are organized under a different utility. They're roughly 45,000 customers in that area. They're served by several units, but the one that we're looking at for carbon capture right now is YGen 2 that serves our Cheyenne customers. So Neil Simpson 2 serves Newcastle and South Dakota customers. In order for, well, as I said, those 2,600 roughly customers in that northeast part of Wyoming would be the only ones potentially paying for the carbon capture equipment. There is the possibility, I would say small, that the South Dakota Public Service Commission would allow for South Dakota customers to pay for that, but I wouldn't bet on it. So that's part of what we're asking for with this 10,000 customer limit. To our knowledge, these would be the only customers impacted by this provision. Rocky Mountain Power would not fall under this. Our Cheyenne customers would not be impacted by this. I don't think Montana Dakota Utilities would be impacted, but they're not really impacted by House Bill 200 anyways. And then the co-ops are out of it. So it would really come down to those 2,600 customers in the northeast part of the state.
Okay, seems common sense. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the 10,000 customer number though, and at a $500 million price tag, that's about $50,000 per customer. My expectation is that any project would only be borne by Wyoming rate payers at this point in time. Would that be consistent with your expectation?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, yes, would be our expectation.
So
or
even,
assumption, perhaps.
Go ahead.
so Mr. Chairman, so even with this change, we're talking about legislation that would put $50,000 per rate payer on average as the expense, and that I assume is similar to what your calculation and projection would be.
Go ahead.
I don't know that I followed your question there, Senator. I'm sorry.
Repeat.
Yep, so at 10,000 people, imagine a circumstance where we got down to the limit of this legislation at a minimum of 10,000. If we have $500 million for the facility, that's $50,000 per person. That would be potentially the most that an individual ratepayer would be if there were that many ratepayers. Is that consistent with your
Mr.
thoughts?
Chairman, I'm
tracking now. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, just getting into kind of the business model of how our regulated utility structure works. If we have a requirement that Black Hills put in place a $500 million facility and it goes into the rate base, from realistically from your corporate business model standpoint, that's not a problem as long as we require it, as long as you're allowed to have recovery, and then you'd be able to recover negotiated profit on that, assuming that it was all paid for as well. So of that $500 million, I don't know what the number is, 4% or something along those lines, but you'd receive a 4% potential profit for the business for that $500 million as well. Is that accurate to how our regulated utility structure works?
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I may phone a friend on that one, but I think another key part of that is, and the other parts of the bill, the 45Q federal credits are going to play a huge role in whether or not we can make this all work. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do here as well. But
Okay, you
a
have two
specific
friends.
question, if
Gentlemen,
anybody has,
either of you want to weigh in?
either you want to.
Yeah, I think I understand your question, Senator. When we look at recovery of investments, we are investor-owned utility. And as you discussed, there is some return component. With the tax credits, part of the funding mechanisms are obviously the benefits of the tax credit that help with that economics. So aligning with the Inflation Reduction Act is a critical component of that funding mechanism. The other component is the rate structures and rate recovery. We would have to file CPCNs for these investments, as discussed earlier with the previous presentation. The CPCN provides a certificate of public convenience and necessity for the utility to allow to be able to make the investment.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I guess I don't understand the need for the tax credits. If you have legislation that's basically requiring or compelling you to implement this and it's entirely paid for by the Wyoming taxpayers, tax credits are nice, but I don't know why you wouldn't just do that and spend $500 million, bill it back to the state ratepayers, and then make a 4% profit on that. I mean, again, this is not your business decision. This is legislation we passed. I'm just trying to understand what the implications of what we did are. And that's how I understand it. The 45Q tax credits, I'll kind of get to that in a second as to whether or not that goes back. Well, I guess it would go back to the overall cost of the project. So your rate of return would be the same, but you might be getting some of that from the tax credits instead of the ratepayers. So that might be a trade-off. But when you say to make this all work, if there's a legislated compulsion from us that says that you need to build a $500 million facility to comply, am I wrong in assuming that you would do that because it's statutory and that you would receive a 4-ish%? And I don't know if you're allowed to disclose that actually exactly what that traditional rate of return is. But if it's at 4%, $20 million to the shareholders, is that an accurate analysis?
Comment, and are you allowed to comment on the rate of return?
Rate of return is approved by the commission. And that's done through every rate case proceeding. So the latest rate of return is whatever was approved by the commission. So that's on file. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but you're correct in all the other comments.
Great, thanks.
Good.
And I guess I'll look to the PSC when they come back up for what that rate of return currently is.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
They're checking. I sense that they are checking while you ask. Okay. Go ahead. Anything else? Anything else? We're good. Co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just hypothetically, if you look at my community of Rawlins, we probably have about 2,500, 3,000 Rocky Mountain Power customers. if Rocky Mountain Power set up a separate subsidiary to supply electricity to Rollins, would they qualify under this? Of not having to charge those customers?
Go ahead.
And that would go to any community because it's based on the number of customers, not necessarily population. So quite a few of our communities might fall under this requirement. I'm not trying to put an extra burden on any community. I'm just trying to make sure we write good, honest legislation. Comments?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, yes, I think I understand your question of potentially a utility could divide up their company, set up several smaller utilities per town and get out of having to do it. Is that kind of the gist of the question? I don't
Chairman, yes.
know. I would assume they would have to go to the Public Service Commission to do something like that, but I don't know that for sure. And that may be a question for the commission to answer, if they would be able
We'll
to
let
do
them
that.
follow up on that. Okay,
Yeah.
any more from the committee? Oh, right there, Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Two questions, Mr. Burns. The first is clarifying. Are you stating that first, Rocky Mountain Power does not serve any more than 10,000 people in the state? But the more important question in my mind is what happens? I'm sorry, Black Hills. Thank you. I guess then the most important question is what happens in the business model of 500 millions to build on what Senator Rothfuss has said? What happens in fact if the next administration or the following administration dissolves the 45Q tax credit at currently at $85 an hour? Well, and that's potential and likelihood or potential. How does that impact this legislation and or more importantly, the whole carbon as it relates to 45Q and your business model and rate of returns?
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I will try to take a stab at that, and then I may have my colleagues join in. So you're correct. We have federal statutes and rules that we have to comply with all the time. That's part of the genesis of this legislation, is trying to marry up the state statute that you all passed in House Bill 200 in 2020 with now the federal credits that are available through the federal tax code. Federal regulations change all the time. As you pointed out, new administrations change EPA rules, they change all these different tax rules. We're constantly trying to figure out our next steps and how we can basically work within the regulatory structure that's handed to us at the state and federal level. There's no guarantee. We don't know what's going to happen if next year we have a new presidential president at the federal level. Who knows what could happen with it? The EPA changes rules and regs all the time. They're usually trending more stringent than not. So it's a constant analysis on our part to make sure that we're maximizing as much as we can under those rules. But I don't know if either you two want to.
Further comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, the only additional comment is, the cost of the investment changes if the rules change with the tax law.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna leave some time to work this bill, committee. Any other comments for these gentlemen? Just before you leave the table, that situation with the state line, you're comfortable with that? It's a very small amount in a neighboring state is what you said at the beginning of your comments, Mr. Bush?
Yes. Yeah, I
Okay.
think I understand your question, Mr. Chairman. But
Okay, yeah, it's the reason I ask, I'm associated with a co-op that we cross state lines and it gets a little complicated once in a while.
Yep. And that, Mr. Chairman, that's what we're looking at is, again, these are our existing structure has this different utilities serving the Newcastle area. And that's what we're trying to figure out how we're gonna make it work.
All
So
right, thank you.
and Mr. Chairman, if I could, there's a couple other points in the bill that we were going to touch on, the staff comments and things like that.
Go
That's
ahead.
okay. If any other questions, I didn't want to
Do
cut
you want
anybody
to
off.
comment before they do that? Go ahead.
Other points in the bill.
Let's let's have you may have a comment after they do that. Would you hit the two staff comments and then we'll come back and Senator Cooper has your undivided attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving to page 3, the staff comment is a good one on the definition of low carbon. Doing a little more research and with a little bit of grace from the chairman and the committee, we tried to do our best to bring in the 45Q language that is really going to help these projects work. The 650 pounds that's listed there was in the original bill, and I believe was a number that the governor's office and some others kind of developed and put in there, but it really doesn't match anything that's in the 45Q tax code in the current IRA. So what we have done is put in the 75% to match up what the federal code has, and the exact language in the federal code has is actually captured design capacity of not less than 75%. So technically what they're saying is we just have to design the unit to capture not less than 75%. So it's a little different in the wording there. And I've got the language in the 45Q that we can add in as an amendment if we need to. But that's the point of it, is to match up as much as we can.
Okay, go ahead.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Bush, looking at that then, if 45Q says design capacity and we have reduces, is that a conflict? Should we remove reduces and change that to design capacity?
Go ahead.
Because what you design for versus what actually happens can be two different things. This tends to specify what actually happens, which means you could end up having to have a higher design capacity to get 75% effectiveness or efficiency.
So I had head nod on the left, on my left, your right.
Yeah,
Are we good?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. And I don't know, Derek, if you wanted to add anything. Derek's our expert on this stuff.
No, that's very astute, and that is how we interpret it as well. I mean, that's part of, as Dave mentions, trying to align it with, 45Q, as that language might even change over time, just so we aren't trying to rewrite the rule each time a tax code changes. But you're correct, and really how that it sets a baseline. So that was another one of the staff questions is, well, how's that established? So the tax code's pretty clear. The way that works is they look at your previous 12 years from the time you actually build a facility that would do carbon capture. Then you take your 3 highest years of those 12 in average, and that somewhat sets that bar at the 75% level. So example would be if we have a unit like YGN 2 that emits around 1 million tons of CO2 a year, then if those 3 highest years are around 1 million tons, you would design that facility to capture basically 750,000 tons. That would be the design. So that would meet the tax requirements. So that unit would be basically designed to do it. Now, the only place where the tax code really talks about the threshold where you would get the credits back is at a limit of 18,750 metric tons. So as long as you capture 18,750 metric tons, you can solicit to the IRS to get that tax credit.
And Sir Co-Chair, does that work?
I have a
Care to
question.
follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm reading the 45Q right now, and I guess that is my question, is there's that reference to the 18,750 metric tons. And then it says, and then it talks about the 75% with the definition in the bill. Like, why wasn't that included?
Go ahead.
I would say that was my fault. Short answer.
Okay. All right. You want to jump to the next one, or this good man here has been very patient? You can ask all the questions you'd like.
I think the answer to my primary question.
Good. Okay. Keep going.
Okay. So perhaps there might be some language that we can use. There's a couple other bills that you have on your docket for later this afternoon that reference the 45Q, and it might be as simple as that, just referencing the stipulations laid out in, I think it's 26 USC 45Q. That may do it. I'm not an attorney, but I think that might get us where we need to be. So.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from the committee? All right, you have one other thing?
And then on, let's see, back to page 5, the red line underneath the 10,000 customers on line 8 and line 9 on page 5. So from an existing coal-fired generation facility should probably be unit. A facility could be several units, and we would put carbon capture on a unit, not a facility. So just a word change there. And again, on line 9. Line 9 also has equivalent new coal-fired generation. We had originally put in coal-fueled generation. If you remember from from the meeting we had in Rock Springs, Derek presented on our coal to hydrogen project. Technically in that project, which would be a pilot project, I think a lot of committee members and governor's office are pretty excited about it. Coal fired is not what happens. The coal is not actually burned. And I don't want to, if I turn Derek loose on this, we'll be here for another hour and a half, but it's to technically be correct, it should be coal fueled and not coal fired in order to bring in the possibility for other projects, pilot projects to be considered complying with the law.
Very simply, it's a chemical reaction.
Keeping your options open. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Co-Chair.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Bush, looking at your suggestion to change facility to unit, if you look at the 10,000 customer issue, are you dedicating one specific unit to those customers in the Newcastle area that you've talked about?
Go ahead.
I mean, is that specified? Really, when you produce, say, 3 units, all the electricity goes into one big wire and then you divvy it up. But are you specifically saying you're dedicating that unit to those customers?
That's correct. Those are part of a utilities rate base that gets approved by the public commissions in the state jurisdictions that oversee those customers. So in this particular case, South Dakota and Wyoming both have jurisdiction. So Wyoming has jurisdiction over those 2,600 customers, and that unit was approved through a CPCN process essentially for putting that into the utilities rate base for rate recovery of those customers.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, committee? All right, you're done. Put PSC back up. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
We'll be in the room if there's any other questions.
Oh, we'll
You just
need you
come
to-
back up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With us.
PSC, did you want to do follow-up? With some questions thrown out to you in that, so we just told you in a circling pattern. Go ahead. Committee, did we want to ask them specifically anything? Yes. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioners, the question that I had to want to follow up is specifically, what is the rate of return for Black Hills as denoted earlier in testimony?
Go ahead. I saw you reaching for calculators and phones.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, the rate of return, and sorry, I had somebody text it to me, so. It's, and of course I can't read. So Black Hills Energy currently has a rate of return of 8.23%. I believe that was established in their last rate case in 2014. And I would just note that they have a current pending rate case for us, so that rate may or may not change in the very near future.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Committee, anything else for the Public Service Commission back at the table? Did you want to do any follow-up on any of this?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say in respect to the bill in general, the commission has no position on this. We think HB 200 is largely meeting its intended purposes, but we're always open to improvements to it. And the only thing I would note, we do have a slight concern on page 10, lines 22 and 23, that appears to restrict our discretion to merely receiving reports. I'm not sure.
Do you
that
have
that
a
would be what the
recommended,
commission would intend, or
do
the
you
committee
offer a
would.
recommended change there?
I don't know, the only thing is to either strike it or say promulgate rules to ensure compliance and,
Okay,
I-
co-chair made a note here, so we'll try
Yeah.
to,
yeah, I would say
page 10.
that version could be struck.
Yeah, page 10, 22, 23. Okay. And we'll, co-chair's tracking that one for you. Anything else?
I-
Okay, thank you
That's all.
both of you for
Thank
coming
you.
back up. All right. Let's see if there's any comment from those in the room on this. The comment, anybody on the, oh, we do, go ahead. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shannon Anderson on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council. And we've been engaging in the commission process since you all passed House Bill 200 in 2020. It's important to note that the commission, of course, has already promulgated rules to implement House Bill 200. We've now received 2 years of utility reports to comply with those House Bill 200 rules and standards. And we expect the third one at the end of March next year. So we're at 9/10 of the way finished in deciding what House Bill 200 looks like. And our concern is that these major amendments really append that process that stakeholders and the commission and the utilities have been participating in for the last 3 years. And what we would encourage you to do is actually not move this forward and instead let that process play out. Let's see what those final reports look like at the end of March. And if at that time there's a need to do something in the future, you have that ability. I would say in terms of some of the concerns that the Black Hills was raising, they resonate with our members. We've been concerned about the ratepayer cost with House Bill 200 compliance, and particularly the limited number of people that we have in our state to pass these enormous costs around. But the rules, again, that the commission passed that stakeholders participated in do consider the economics of these projects and specify that a project would only be required if it is economically viable. So the commission in its decision-making process will consider what those costs look like across a rate base, how many customers would have to pay for it, and whether that is an economically important decision for the state of Wyoming. I would also say that there's also another catch-all in the bill itself that you all passed in 2020 that does have a rate cap at 2% for these projects. I will say that there is a differing understanding of what that cap really could mean in practice. But if you all remember, the original House Bill 200 in the 2020 session actually had $1 billion price tag in it. And that was the original version of the bill proposed by the governor's office. And that was stricken through an amendment process in the 2020 session through an amendment proposed by the Wyoming Industrial Energy Consumers. And that basically, again, limits the ability of any utility to recover for House Bill 200 compliance at 2% at an annual rate. They're able to start collecting that now. And in fact, our utilities do have rate surcharges and tariffs in place currently, where they are actually collecting money right now for House Bill 200 compliance. But there is at least a cap in the bill that you all passed. So we would just encourage you to kind of think about the process that's already in place. The other thing I would mention, of course, is 45Q is federal law. I think it's pretty unusual for Wyoming law to just say, go comply with federal law. Utilities can, of course, do that already. Those incentives are out there. They're in federal law and regulation. Guidance is coming out, regularly on that. So if the incentive is already there, then, let them go do that. I think the question is House Bill 200 different than that? And what incentives and regulations And, what is the mandate that Wyoming wants to have? Is it different than 45Q? If it is, and I think that's the way it was established from you all in 2020, then we should keep with the process that we have now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
It is unique that we would say go comply with federal law. Let me ask you this, 200 is still a basis there. It's not going away. So I'm trying to understand your concern. There's some amendments here, but 200 is still there. That's the basis. So your concern is just that we're adding these, what?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, our concern is that the PSC is now going to have to do a new rulemaking process. Again, it was a very complicated rulemaking process that we went through before with House Bill 200. It took a period of time. And I'm not sure what happens to, we'll see what happens during session. But again, there's reports coming from utilities, the final report for House Bill 200 compliance at the end of March. That's happening before, right as session is ending, right? And so we'll have those come in. And then now, there'll be a new version of House Bill 200 that utilities then have to comply with. And then there's new rulemaking. And so I think it confuses where we are in this moment of time to do something this session, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Committee questions for her? Oh, Representative Conrad.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you for your remarks and I appreciate those. I guess my question is, when we look at 2020, when 2000, when more importantly, Bill 200 was passed, the evolution of the ever-changing environmental requirements and expectations from 3 years ago to today is vastly different than they were then. So my question, I guess, rhetorically, what are companies supposed to do to remain in front of the ever-changing landscape without taking actions such as been proposed today with this bill we're reviewing, such that we protect the consumers, obviously, in this ever-changing world, as it requires capital investment that ultimately has to be distributed, excluding the 45Q equation. But 2000 versus 2003, I will bet, 2023 rather, I will bet you that 2026 looks much different than 2023. So that's a question to you. How do we manage that from your perspective?
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, that's a great question. You have to remember, though, that House Bill 200 is the state's regulatory mandate. It is not a carrot, it's a stick. It requires certain things of utilities and allows them to charge customers for those things. And so I think the question is, what is the state policy related to all of these changing dynamics? Is it to require whatever utilities would be doing otherwise, because those incentives, those carrots are now out there from the federal government? Or is it something else? And, that's a policy question before you all, but I would just, again, emphasize that House Bill 200 is a regulatory mandate. It requires things. No other state in the country does what we do here. And it's a unique requirement for Wyoming utilities and for the customers, and it forces customers to pay for things that no other utility customers in the country pay for. And that is what you all have done as state policy. So again, I think it's a decision for you how closely you want that state policy to match the carrots that are out there now through federal tax law, or whether you want to stick with your original plan, which again has already gone through rulemaking. Utilities are already in the process of complying with. We're almost 9/10 of the way finished with that. And we would just encourage you to kind of, let's stay in the same race, let's stick to the same horse, and let's not change things up at the 11th hour.
Any follow up? Good. Okay, committee. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Further comment from those in attendance, Mr. Bush?
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to come back up for a second. So to clarify a couple things, the 2%, if you'll notice on your bill draft.
Page.
Yep, I'm getting there. Sorry, sir. It is the language on page 9. Line 14 begins the discussion of the 2% surcharge, which Ms. Anderson is correct. That was added in by the Wyoming Industrial Energy Consumers to cap the recovery that can happen on the equipment. For us, that equates to a few $1,000,000 a year, which, as I said, that doesn't come close to paying for the cost of a carbon capture unit. So what the language that we added on bottom of 9, top of 10 is to help use that money that we do collect if we decide, when we decide, I guess, to go for the surcharge, because we're going to have some money to help pay for this. So I believe right now we have it filed with the commission, but we have not actually begun collecting any sort of a surcharge. That money will go towards a pre-feed study and any of the other engineering studies that we need to try to implement the law. The basis of this, in discussion with Co-Chairman Burkhardt and the governor's office and others, is we're doing what we can to try to make House Bill 200 work. Were we interested in carbon capture prior to 2020? Honestly, no. We're a smaller utility, so it's a large expense for us to consider. And we were pretty happy just digging coal and burning coal, and all was well. 2020, the bill was passed. We're now looking at implementing it. Next March, in 6 months, 5 months, we're supposed to file our final plan. The technology that we're looking at is still evolving, and there's a lot of new companies that are popping up as this technology grows. There's a lot of excitement in the industry about this. So part of what we were hoping to do with this bill is push back that date at least a year, so we have more time to look at the new technologies that are coming out. There's a process that's called the amine process. That is really the one that's the most commercially viable right now. It's at a level 9, which means it's pretty close to being readily available. We lose about 30% of our capacity on our generating unit with that process. So our 100 megawatt unit goes to a 70 megawatt unit. We have to then replace that 30 megawatts that we lost, because it's still power that needs to be fed to our customers. We still have a contract for that. That's one of the processes we're working through. The other process that's on about a level 6 is the cryogenic. And again, Derek and those guys can explain more about the actual science behind these, but that actually is potentially a better fit for our system, but it's only at a level 6. So it's not ready to be commercially deployed. So as we work through a lot of these evolving changes in the industry, that's what a lot of this bill is trying to help us do, is to help us implement this and get carbon capture going in the state. There is a process in place that we're going through with the commission that's completely accurate. However, it's nowhere near, we have a lot more work to do, and we need more time and more flexibility. The 45Q credits will help us pay for this. We're also exploring third-party partnerships with other developers to see if we can figure some things out. All of this is ongoing as we wrap our arms around this law and the regulation, and again, try to make it work. So I guess my final pitch, and I'm probably sounding kind of desperate, but these changes would be extremely helpful in actually getting the law implemented.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So just clarity on the 2%, because I think folks were confused about the 2% when this legislation passed a couple of years ago. That the 2% is an allowable rate increase, as I understand it, that you can use to generate some revenue. This would change it to allow more flexibility for how that 2% revenue is used. That should be applied in theory towards the costs of the overall project. But as we see on line 11 and beyond of that page 10, the language, to the extent the rate recovery mechanism is insufficient to compensate the public utility for its prudently incurred incremental costs to comply with the reliable and dispatchable low carbon energy standard, the commission shall take such actions as necessary, notwithstanding any other provision of this section, to ensure the public utility is able to recover its prudently incurred incremental costs. So as you see it, I mean, that's the key language for the funding, that it's not the 2%. That's the language that leads to, if you have a project in place, it will be funded, and there isn't necessarily a cap on it based on the statute of how much that cost is. Is that a fair analysis consistent with yours?
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think that's that's fair. The 2%, as I said, really is, it's a minuscule number, when it comes to a project of this size. So.
Okay, thank you. Further from the committee, while you got him, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Whoops.
Oh,
Be patient, Mr. Heiner. We're going to head back to you. Go ahead, Co-Chair.
I'm sorry, Mr. Co-Chair.
Prince, okay.
Thank you,
Representative
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bush, when, correct me if I'm wrong, but as other utilities are already collecting the 2% and allowed under this House Bill 200, you mentioned that you are not yet collecting the 2% allowed. How are you paying for these studies? You said you're already evaluating some of the options, looking at amine and freeze zone cryogenic. So are you just taking that under your own operations expense at this point because you're not collecting the 2%?
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I would probably look to my colleagues for clarification on that since they're the ones kind of heading up the program. But yes, I think at this point, we're incurring those costs, going through that process. The 2% would be basically like a reimbursement of what we have spent on the engineering costs and everything else that go with it. But I
think I saw a smile of confirmation back there, so we're okay. Okay, good.
I got a yeah, so.
Okay. All right, Representative Heiner, good? Co-Chair.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Bush, we're pushing out the time limit on this, the dates. Is that necessary to allow the technology to catch up with the rules? I mean, you say the amine process is a level 9. That's pretty much process Petra Nova used. It does work, but Petra Nova went under once. They're back in operation, trying to make a go of it. Really, do any of these processes really work efficiently and economically enough to put them in place?
Just hold for a moment. We got some thoughts.
I have an expert approaching the table, sir, that I would defer to.
Sir, your thoughts on the dates? Pushback.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're correct. It's really in that date that we extended out to is aligned kind of with that 45Q. So it's again, trying to give us as much time as possible to see if, other technologies like cryogenic, there's membrane technologies, this School of Energy Resource and the work going at Dry Fork is all about, membranes. So we're looking at all those kind of technologies. But yes, to your point, Petra Nova with the mean was really the TRL 9. And so as a public utility looking at prudent technology, that's really the one we had to focus at. So we're doing a feed study on that. We're doing research with cryogenic folks, also looking at membranes, really all the above. But it's just allow that time so we can really analyze what the most economic path forward is.
Okay.
And
Well, we've
Mr.
got-
Chairman,
Go ahead.
again, to clarify, right now, under the current statute, we have to come up and submit our final plan in March. So we wouldn't have the time. We have to say, we're doing this
That's it.
in March. And what we're asking for is more time to see if some of these other technologies might be a better fit for us and better for our customers. So
Rapidly changing energy world. Okay, well, we've got these two gentlemen back up. Anybody want to take? All right, gentlemen, thank you.
thank you,
Back-
Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
I think we're moving from comment for those in attendance, to those on the internet.
Yep, and Mr. Chairman, I would just ask those online to raise their hand on Zoom if they wish to speak.
Okay, and you can see them right there.
Yep, and Mr. Chairman, it looks like we have Bruce AC first.
Okay, Mr. AC, the floor is yours. Mr. AC, can you hear us?
I can. And apparently you cannot see me.
You trying? Okay.
Now we're all lucky. Mr. Chairman, my name is Bruce Acey. I appear before you today on behalf of Montana Dakota Utilities Company. I thank you for the opportunity to appear via video. And I appear to, I guess, and tell you what I've mentioned before, and that is Montana Dakota Utilities provides electrical and natural gas services in northern Wyoming, particularly electricity in Sheridan and Buffalo. We have about 16,000 customers taking electricity, but we're here. We don't believe that the change in the bill particularly affects us because we have our generation primarily outside of the state, although we do participate with Black Hills in one unit in Wyoming. We don't believe that the bill will impact us, but we do stand in support of Black Hills and their position with respect to the amendment. I believe it's appropriate and believe that Black Hills has put a lot of time in reviewing this so that it can benefit consumers, and particularly as we look at how we can benefit consumers and keep costs economical for them. That's always been the primary goal with respect to providing services to our customers. And so we stand in support of the amendment as proposed by Black Hills today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Acey? Any questions? Not? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Acey. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Any further comments online? Quick technical question, just because I'm curious. You bring him on there, public TV has to bring him on separate? I saw you doing some hand motions. How does that work?
Mr. Chairman, we bring the speakers on and
And it's
our
his
good
job
friend
to
from
follow.
PBS turns
Okay.
it,
Just
turns it on.
curious. I got a broadcast going on for the next 2 days where we have to bring on the big screen at University of Wyoming in addition to our football broadcast. So that's a personal question. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Thanks, Dave. I think you did a great
Mr.
job.
Co-Chair, could I have Mr. Bush come back up for a minute, please? I have another question. Did he leave? No, he's hiding. Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Bush, you indicated that by March you have to have in effect a final answer to go to PSC of what you plan to do. However, right now, it appears you only have one choice of what you might want to implement for carbon capture. Am I correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, so my question is, if we push that final decision out, I'm picking a number here, 2 years to submit that to the PSC, would that help with resolving the technical issue of what's available and what's most efficient?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that is our hope. Yes. The technology is moving rapidly on this.
Answer it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again. You're getting a lot of time this morning, sir.
Should I just stay? No.
Okay. All right, that's in. Further questions or further comments? I think we've covered the room. We've covered the internet committee. What is your desire? There a motion on the bill? Move the bill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Let's work the bill. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose an amendment on page 3, line 10. The new wording reduces, strike that and insert has a design capacity of.
Go ahead.
So that would be my amendment, so that line would read, and I'll just move up a little bit. Utilization and storage technology that has a design capacity of not less than 75%, et cetera.
Go ahead.
That reverses the intent. I know what you're getting at, but that language means that you can produce 75% of the CO2 instead of 25% of the CO2. So it
Co-Chair,
needs to have a
respond to
reduction in the
that.
concept.
Mr. Chairman, I was waiting for a second before discussion.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry. Second,
Okay,
second now
second.
discussion.
Then what I just said.
Summarize what you said. again.
Yeah.
Just nutshell it.
I think the intent is to say has a design capacity that would lead to a not less than a 75% reduction or similar language to 45Q. The language as proposed says that the design capacity would be not less than 75% of the carbon dioxide emissions, which is the opposite number of the intent of 45Q. So
Sean?
I think you want it consistent with 45Q.
respond?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that that change would conform to 45Q.
Go ahead, Brian. You want to weigh in on this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can share the language from 45Q. And in terms of the capture design capacity, it's in the case of an electricity generating facility with respect to any carbon capture equipment for the applicable electrical generating unit as such facility has a capture design capacity of not less than 75% of the baseline carbon oxide production of the unit.
Mr. Senator Office, does that answer your question or leave you still concerned?
The motion is still wrong. That language is perfect.
Okay, do you want to withdraw?
And use that language.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with the second, I will defer to 45Q language.
Got a friendly second. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So withdrawn, we're going with the 45Q language.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator,
would it then be appropriate as, and I would consider this a friendly amendment, is also to include the language about the 18,750 metric ton of qualified carbon and just adopt that whole definition entirely that's in 45Q.
for everybody listening in, where are you exactly when you say that?
Yeah,
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at the language of 45Q, which I don't think anyone has in front of them,
Okay,
but it's, if you looked at the statute that's referenced in the bill, it says, in the case of an electric generating facility, and then it's got a Romanet, it says captures not less than 18,750 metric tons of qualified carbon oxide during the taxable year. And with respect to any carbon capture equipment, and then the 75% language.
okay.
So I think that'd be a friendly amendment, is
I
just to
think so.
adopt that whole
I would agree with
definition.
that being a
Well,
friendly
we've had that
amendment.
amendment withdrawn, so at this point, what are you asking? Because, yeah,
Motion's on the table.
I changed the,
oh, you changed. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And you're friendly with that?
Yeah.
And you're good with that? And Representative Conrad, where do you stand with that?
I have a friendly amendment as well.
we have to handle this one unless you have an amendment to this one.
Okay, we are on the amendment. Everybody clear?
Yes, I have a.
Restate what we're
Oh,
doing
he has a friendly amendment he wants to
in
make to
addition
this
to,
one.
Yes.
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After electricity, comma, per unit.
You got a second?
I would say that's a friendly amendment.
Okay, friendly. Everything is clear on the table. You summarize one more time where you're at.
Okay, we are going to drop the reduces, not less than, and go with the wording that is in 45Q concerning design capacity and the 18,000 plus tons.
All right, everybody clear?
Mr. Chairman.
Brian?
The only question, Mr. Chairman, I have Representative Conrad. When you mentioned electricity, you mean on page 3, line 12 is where you were intending to add per unit?
Yes, sir. As it aligns to 45Q language you already articulated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, clarification. Everybody's good? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That is passed. Brian, you're good. Okay, we'll continue on.
So
Go ahead, Representative Conrad.
Uh,
Wait, we have Representative Conrad.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman, on line, or rather, page 3, line 15. I believe there was testimony earlier by Mr. Burns that it is no longer coal-fired. Wasn't there some language?
Mr.
Fuel?
Chairman,
Go ahead.
I believe that suggestion was for a change on page 5.
Okay, 5. But we were using coal fired on page 5 too, as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I believe that on line 16, though, there would be a desire to have unit instead of facility from the existing coal-fired generation unit.
Okay, we're gonna come back to the unit and I appreciate that. Do you want to change to the coal fueled on page 3 or leave it as?
No,
Brian,
there's-
your counsel?
I don't think there's a desire for that on page 3. But the unit
Representative
aspect
Conrad?
is desired.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure what Senator Rothfuss was.
Senator Rothfuss,
Line
further
15.
clarification?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On lines 15, 16, page 3, this isn't where the coal fueled
Okay.
generation discussion needs to take
Representative
place.
Conrad, you're comfortable leaving as is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You
But-
want, Mr. Senator Rothus, you want to put unit in?
But this is where unit would need to take
Say
place,
it
correct?
again.
So I would make a motion on line 16 to change facility to unit.
Okay, motion made, second, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That amendment has passed.
And Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
this would be a question for staff. Based on what we just did, I just wanted to double check that the B paragraph still needs to be there if we have the same language in 45Q. It seems like the original language was trying to contemplate that, but it still might be necessary. So I just asked Brian if we still
Brian,
need
your
the B
thoughts?
paragraph.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I may reword that in light of the motion, but probably leave some
Leave it.
reference to that in there.
Let's, we
Comfortable
can leave
leaving
it for
him with the
now. Yeah,
Flexibility?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, Brian, sounds like you got a little flexibility there. Go ahead. Anything else on page 3? Page 4,
Mr. Chairman,
go ahead.
to the staff comment, and I think that's a good comment, that we need to decide the baseline for those emissions, whether we follow 45Q or just set a year. And we don't have to do what 45Q does. We can set a year.
Go ahead.
And I would just like a discussion on that before I propose an amendment.
Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your last amendment obviates that because it now goes to the stated design instead of the actual emissions. So I think we've taken care of it by the new language that you introduced from 45Q would be a comparison to the stated design.
Comfortable, Representative?
I could be wrong,
Okay, we're
but
good.
that's the way
We're
I'm taking
moving
it
on.
right now. I'm getting
He's
some
comfortable.
general nodding. but-
Brian?
Mr. Chairman, I think, I mean, depending on the language of 45Q, if there is a reference to baseline carbon dioxide production that's inserted in that, probably want to say what baseline carbon dioxide production is, whether that's the standard that's in 45Q, which is the three highest years of emissions in the last 12 years, depending on when the facility was built, or something else that the committee desires.
I'll come back.
I'll let, Mr.
Senator, you want to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, I will let that go for now.
Okay. Senator?
And Mr. Chairman, I was just looking at Senator Ellis's computer there where in 45Q, it refers to a baseline carbon oxide production definition that is relatively detailed about a 3-year highest annual carbon oxide production. So honestly, the B paragraph, if left, might take care of, well, no, because it's not required, it's an or. But it looks like it's relatively complicated and either we want to reference back to 45Q at some point or take the heart of that definition in.
I'm going to ask Brian to follow up on your comment, Senator. Go ahead.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I think it would just be a question of whether the committee would want to bring in that entire definition. It is quite lengthy. Or just say baseline carbon oxide production as defined by 25 or 26 USC 45Q E2.
Committee definition or just reference it? Reference it. Okay, we're moving on. Page 4.
Do we need to propose a formal amendment?
Oh, yeah, I'm so moved.
Moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's passed. Page 4. Page 5. Go ahead.
Page 5, I'd like to make an amendment to page 5, line 8, facility to unit. And then page 5, line 9, fired to fueled and unit or facility to unit.
Okay, second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. You heard his proposal, unit on line 8, fueled on line 9. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That has passed. Page, any further on page 5, 6, page 6, page 7. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose an amendment on page 7, line 6. To, hold on a minute. add after the word location or decrease reliability or dispatchability of power.
Would you repeat that for staff and those at the committee table?
Okay. Page 7, line 6, insert after location or decreases reliability or dispatchability of power.
We got that down. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Discussion. Line 6, page 7, further discussion.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, before voting, I'd just be interested in knowing the implications of that. I was just reading through to understand.
Go ahead,
But if-
Co-Chair.
I just don't want the power companies to decrease their reliability or dispatchability to do any of this. I think they need to keep it at what it is or better it. And I don't want to hear the excuse later, well, we had to decrease reliability, et cetera, because we did all of this work.
Does that answer your question, Senator?
Follow up.
Go ahead.
I can be misremembering at this point, but I recall when we were debating either this bill or maybe 159 a couple of years before, we used the word dispatchability, and the PSC came back and said that that's not really a term of art that they recognize. The reliability might be, but the dispatchability might not have been. I could be misremembering that, so I
Brian,
guess I'd want to know if we're wrapping
dispatchability?
ourselves around the axle.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, it is in House Bill 200 on page 3, line 1 is a definition of
used it, okay.
dispatchable that's
So there's
used in,
reference.
Okay,
in that act.
all right, no worries then, thank you.
And as far as reliability goes, there's probably a few thousand patrons that would help them with that. Okay. All right.
Question on the amendment.
Yeah, on the amendment, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Page 7, that has passed. Good, good. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Further comments before we call for the vote?
Sure.
Go ahead, Senator.
I'm not, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure where we actually pushed back the date for their final report on
Brian?
by the 2 years.
Mr. Chairman, that's page 5, line 26.
I'm sorry.
Page 5, line 26, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do see that, but we had the discussion on when their final report was due to the PSC as far as what their final plan was. And we discussed moving that back by 2 years or a year, whatever the number might be. And I'm not seeing that here, so that they're not required in March of next year to submit their final plan, but would be moving it back by a year or two. I just don't see it in here.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
So, Mr. Chairman, and maybe the commission can help with this. On page 6, line 13 is our requirements for the PSC to establish intermediate requirements. And I'm not sure if it's under that paragraph that rules were promulgated to require a certain report by next year as part of those intermediate standards.
We've already had the commission up here, so we're at the point of moving forward. I sense we're probably covered there, but Senator Cooper, if you're still uncomfortable.
I still don't see it, sir. When, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go to 621. Page 6, line 21. Annual report, file with annual report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do see that part, but that does not address their final plan for carbon reduction that they would be required to report in March of 24.
Yeah.
So I guess my question
Okay.
would be maybe for the PSC or for
Yeah, I think
Mr. Bush,
we've already heard
what
them,
we're
but let's
referring
go,
to.
let's go Brian, just because we've already had the PSC.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, I think I have found it in their rules. And this is a rule-based requirement. It says not later than March 31 of 2023. A public utility must submit for commission approval a final plan with its proposed energy portfolio standard. And then it goes on to say what that final plan shall include.
It's in rule.
So Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, I'm not sure that, I mean, that specific deadline of March 31, 2023 is not in the bill. It is not in current law. That's a requirement that the commission established by rule based on House Bill 200.
Since you're still uneasy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I am still uneasy. It's not in the bill apparently. That's why I'm not seeing it. That's one of the asks that,
I would welcome an amendment before we call for the vote.
well, is it a rule or is it in the statute?
Rules and regs. Rules and regs, do you want it in statute?
How do we, pardon me, sir, but how do we fix that?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I'm thinking a solution might be adding some less language in non-codified, saying that, any provisions that of rulemaking that the commission adopted that conflict with this, or even specifically, but I think that could be added as an amendment, maybe
To accommodate all of rules.
to
and regs.
accommodate some of that down the road. I get what
Okay.
you're saying, but I don't know the solution today.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, another option would be to put in perhaps the end of page 6, line 17, at the end of that paragraph, a final, if Mr. Chairman, Senator Cooper, if you have a date in mind for a final plan, you could just spell that out in statute.
You want to rough out the language for him and he'll finalize it if you have your date. So we'd go end of line 17. Right after that.
Right after that, I would defer to Mr.
In concept,
Brian.
Brian, would you give us in concept?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, any final plan for providing a portfolio standard to the commission shall be submitted not later than X date. And Mr. Chairman, I would leave that date to the committee. I assume it would be later than March 2023, though.
Want to match any other dates up? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would,
The amendment and you throw the date in, Senator.
okay,
Go ahead.
that I would defer to Mr. Fuller's language there with the date of 2025, March of 2025.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Comfortable with the wording in
Mr. Chairman?
concept in 2025? Senator Rothus.
I think we might be better off leaving it up to the PSC to redecide a final date, because if we're moving the compliance date out, then I've
Would you put the
forgotten which
date
page
then?
it's on.
Would you put the date and rules and regs there?
Yeah, because that compliance date, we're moving it like 6 years or something. Where is that?
Yep, that's Mr. Chairman, page 5, and that moves it from 2030 to 2038.
There we go. If we're moving the compliance date from 2030 to 2038, I don't want them to decide in 2025 what technology they're going to use, honestly.
Okay, Representative, I want you to weigh in, our attorney down here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think what we've already said was in rulemaking has been processed, and if we want to make a change in the states, I actually prefer Senator Ellis's suggestion about that they basically accommodate their rulemaking dates according to what we've done with the pushing them out to 2038, and let them decide when they need for their processes. I mean, that's my personal preference, but
Ellis and then Cooper. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can't remember, do we have a motion for an amendment on the floor right now? from
We do,
Senator
but we're open for discussion.
If that amendment were to go away, I would say that I would offer an amendment. And I don't know if it'd be in section 2 or 3, but a non-codified area. So it wouldn't be in the statute, but it says the PSC shall adjust rulemaking or deadlines set forth in rule to reflect the additions adopted in this bill or something along that line. That's the conceptual amendment.
Okay, you're talking about another amendment.
Yeah,
let's
so
hold
that would be, I think, a way
You've
to
got that in a
tell them
holding-
to adjust their timeframes by rule.
Okay, you've got that in a holding pattern. Let's go back to Senator Cooper. Do you want to stick with your wording?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's probably a better solution than what I had actually supposed there. So I think I would, at this point.
Withdraw?
I will go.
Okay, Senator Ellis, all yours to correct us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that on page 12, lines 6 and 7, that the LSO add some language directing the Public Service Commission. It already says right now shall promulgate all rules necessary to implement this act and adjust deadlines. And I would leave it to Brian.
All encompassing CatchNet. Do you have a second?
Second.
Moved in second. And any further discussion? Any further discussion? Are you comfortable, Senator, that this took care of what you wanted?
Question.
Go ahead.
So for Senator Ellis, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So adjusting the deadlines appropriately, in other words, we're pushing out their final deadline to another 8 years to, in effect, 2032.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the thought would be to allow the PSC to sort through that.
Okay.
And then our ability to oversee that in the rulemaking process, it'll come before Joint Minerals will have a chance to look at it. And if they didn't get the right deadline that we envision, then we can reject their rule.
Okay.
And PSC knows what they have now. Okay. All right, good. All those in favor of this amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Brian, you comfortable? Okay. All right, did that take us through the end?
And Mr. Chairman, I just note there was one more staff comment on page 11, dealing with language on page 10 for the committee's consideration.
Okay, anybody want to comment on that staff comment? Good. All right, sir, I think we're ready for vote on the bill. Take a roll.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 24 LSO 0181, low carbon reliable energy standards amendments.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, who said that? Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just have a comment if I can.
Okay.
Um,
vote.
I will be a no vote on this, and I realize I'll probably be in the minority, but had I been able to vote on House Bill 200 before, it would have been a no vote as well. I think we're caught up in a situation where this has been dictated to us. The federal government on one hand says, you know what, we want you to go to low carbon fuel sources. However, they're going full bore ahead on green energy. So they hand out carbon credits and they hand out grants on one side, while on the other side, they continue down the path against fossil fuels. So our job is to watch out for the Wyoming consumer. And the Wyoming consumer is being punished on both ends. The Wyoming consumer is being punished because we have to now look for sequestration, for adding on to our power plants. And Mr. Bush's testimony was very good, both in corporations and here today. They were happy just burning coal, not having to do any of this. And what Wyoming has done is codified EPA rules, which are ever changing, and will never catch up with them because their goal is to get rid of fossil fuels. So they're forced to put into investments $500 million on technology that testimony said is not commercially viable. And I believe it's to add on cost. The federal government's plan is to add on cost to coal while they continue to reduce cost on green energy. And that's the path we're going down. My job as a legislator for Wyoming is to look out for Wyoming consumers. And that's why I can't vote for this bill.
Understood. Thank you. Follow up. Do you have any concerns about the date, the necessity to push the date back? Or you just in general, the concept is a no?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In general, the concept is a no.
Thank you. Further comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be an aye, and I was a hard no on House Bill 200 for all of the reasons that Representative Knapp laid out with regard to the fact that the math just doesn't work out for the Wyoming consumers on $500 million. The state of Wyoming spends between $1 and $1.5 billion a year on all power costs all in. So the idea that we can afford $500 million into the rate base was a struggle for me then. It's a struggle for me now. I'm an eye on this bill because it at least provides 8 additional years for those technologies to be proved out, for the costs to come down, and maybe for some solutions to actually come across our plate that could potentially move this forward, as well as more time for us to think this through, to hear from the public, and to potentially remediate the challenges that would be in place with this legislation. So I share many of the concerns of Representative Knapp, but I think this helps ease those concerns. And so I'll be an aye.
Thank you. Further comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'll be an aye vote on this bill as well. I think the intent of this whole carbon capture industry is to provide a way to save the fossil fuels industry, because if we don't do anything at this point, the rest of the country is going to move on without us. And they're going to eventually fossil fuels will just die out completely. So if we don't do anything, you know, I'd be curious to hear what the good representative at the end of the table has to say about what if we don't do anything.
Okay. Either direction. Any further comment, Representative Knapp?
Mr. Chairman, I think to answer that, you know, Wyoming's going to be faced with some serious decisions. We heard testimony and saw the graph. The IRP direction is going towards solar, battery and wind as we go forward into the future. And we know that we also know that our multi-state protocol that we've seen also is moving towards green energy full bore. And I don't know what's going to happen to those protocols in the future, but I think that's one direction Wyoming needs to go, is to separate ourselves from those protocols, so that we know we have the resources to power Wyoming. We know we have the resources to export our energy to other states. It's whether Wyoming decides to take a stand, whether it's a Nebraska simulated public utility, whether it's some kind of co-op. But I think it's time for Wyoming to take a stand and stop being a victim of the EPA, who has over and over again in the last several years lost in federal court on their overreach of regulation. And so I think there was one comment with future elections, the Q45 credit may absolutely just go away. Even the House Republicans today are fighting to get those out. So I think it's just Wyoming's role to stop being a victim. We have the resources. We're an exporter of energy. Other states need that energy. It's not as if they can't have energy or can't keep increasing their energy. And so they need that energy as well. And I think it's similar to a hamster in the wheel. We're all caught up in this, and it's rolling downhill with the EPA regulations. And until sovereign states take a stance and say, enough is enough, we control our destiny for our future, I think it's time.
Question. What? Right here, we have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just by way of a context and response is I share some of the concerns about House Bill 200. I didn't interact with it. I'm a brand new legislator. It creates some confusion in my mind about what the thoughts were behind it, but we don't have before us today a bill to repeal House Bill 200. We have a bill to push back dates, give more time. And so again, that's what's before us, not a rehashing of 200. It's can we look at what is before us and push back dates? So that's why I would support this, to push back dates, to better understand the technology, to see how that we can help our fossil fuel industry, because I believe that is probably a lot of the intent that was behind 200. But again, things haven't quite developed as we should, but there's nothing before us here about repealing 200. So we could talk about that another time, but what's before us is this bill that pushes back and gives time for us to better navigate, and for our industries to navigate, and protections for some of the consumers. So again, I'm for it.
Thank you. Representative Knapp, that's why I had referenced the dates and why you felt about it, because that's why I'm tracking. All right, any further questions?
Question.
There's a question, been called another question. Take the roll.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator Ellis, Senator Jones, Senator Rothfuss,
Aye.
Representative Banks, Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
No.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver, Representative Western, Chairman Burkhart, Chairman Dockstader,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, there are 11 aye, 1 no, and 2 excused.
Passes, discuss where we're gonna introduce on which side a little bit later, I guess. Yeah. All right. Okay, folks, we can take a break now. You've been diligent and we're gonna come back at 11:10-ish, so to speak. Go take a health break and then we'll hear from Mr. Von Aaron. Okay, Mr. Co-Chair, we are ready to start while people come in. Wyoming mining issues, followed by Mr. Fred Von Aaron's and Genesis Alkali. We're going to talk about railroads and everything else. Who wants to start? Oh, they'll come once they hear we're going.
I'll get the house. We could take.
Pause for just a second. Good. I think we should start, gentlemen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and members of the committee that aren't here yet.
Talk really loud so they hear you in the hallway.
Committee members are gonna miss some dynamic testimony if
Oh,
they
yeah.
don't.
I would
come
say something
back
very
into-
dynamic right now.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Travis Detai. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association. And while we're waiting for folks to come in, the setup up here is a little awkward for me. I didn't realize, I'm staring at myself. I've really lost a lot of hair in the last.
That's
few-
dynamic. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, it's always a privilege to address the Minerals Committee, to follow up on some of the discussions we've had over the last year regarding the rail service in Wyoming. I'm going to kind of bounce around the state to talk about, the different regions and what our producers in our different sectors are experiencing with rail service right now. And I'll start off, since we're in the heart of coal country in the Powder River Basin. The rail service was really difficult here about 18 months ago, a year ago. And it feels good to come to the committee and report rail service with our coal operators has improved dramatically. And a couple of points when I surveyed my member companies is the basic question is how are your trains coming in? And about a year ago, when we asked the same question, talking about nominations of what was being put up and what was getting hauled, we had that percentage down around 65% in some cases, where the norm is usually between 90 and 95%. I'm pleased to report today that almost across the basin, the Powder River Basin, we are seeing those nominations back up around the 95, between the 85 and 95% level, which is, for lack of a better term, normal. And that's a good thing. A year ago, we actually had one operation that had a couple of non-consecutive days where they got no trains at all. And the comment that I got from that operation was the service is much improved and we're quite close to where we need to be. So that's significant. So and I would like to just kind of commend our friends in the rail industry, because without the trains, we don't work, we don't move. We don't get our coal out, we don't get our bentonite out, we don't get our soda ash out. We are heavily reliant on our partners on the railroad. And they have, once our concerns were relayed, they did what they needed to do. And we're in the Powder River Basin, at least we are where we need to be. And there are still hiccups, but I can say that a lot that's likely to be on the mine side or on the customer side as much as it is going to be on the railroad side today. So the service we're back on track up here with our coal industry. The one concern that I did hear from a couple of operators is that a lot of the increased demand of about a year ago, and largely due to the increase, the high spike in natural gas prices, as we're moving forward today. The demand is a little bit softer. We're running about 4% below where we were last year. But natural gas, and given some world events, natural gas is starting to tick up a little bit. We're at about $3.30 gas right now. And just for the committees, kind of where our sweet spot is, when gas is about $2.75, our higher BTU coal is competitive. Once we get over $3, our lower BTU coal is competitive. So, we're kind of at the competitive spot right now, where gas prices are kind of starting to tick up. The concern that I did hear is if, given world events, if gas prices continue to spike, or if we find ourselves in a situation like we did a couple of years ago when the prices went up to about $9, then of course the demand for coal is going to ramp up significantly. And, that's just something in the back of folks' mind that if that happens again, will the railroads be prepared to meet that demand? And I think we're pretty comfortable saying that they probably will. But that's just a concern that's sitting in the back of folks' mind right now. One of the things that because we're so dependent on transportation, and the American transportation infrastructure is so intertwined. I had one operator that they're having some issues getting their coal to their customers, not necessarily on the rail side, but getting it to the Mississippi River and barging it down the river, because apparently the Mississippi River has been low, and that's been congesting some barge traffic. That's nothing we can do about that in Wyoming, but I thought that was kind of interesting. In the Bighorn Basin with our bentonite producers, they're still having some issues. Definitely not to the extent I think that where the coal industry was a year ago, but those issues still exist, and having some trouble getting the trains that they need at certain points in time. Again, we communicate these issues to our friends in the railroads, and they are aware of them, and they are looking to address them. And I think Mr. Anderson is going to talk a little bit about some of the adjustments they've made as well. And I'm not going to go into that. I'll let him speak to that. So on the Trona side, and I think largely, we're here to kind of update on where we were from last year, or from the last meeting in Rock Springs. I can report from my member survey that a couple of key points: service has improved, and perhaps more importantly, not only the service, but the communications have improved. And I really want to commend the Union Pacific. They have really, went above and beyond to start communicating a little bit better and improving those communications with the operators to address those problems. And again, I think Mr. Anderson will kind of go in to some of that in more detail as well. There does remain concern. Again, kind of similar to the coal industry. We are expecting significant increases in production in the soda ash industry in the coming years. And there's that concern as to what the Union Pacific is going to be doing to be able to accommodate that. And I think you'll hear a little bit more about, the railroads are aware of those concerns and are looking to address that as well. And, really that is my report from the industry side, from the 1,000-foot generic level. And it's actually kind of fun to come to the committee and be positive about something for a change. And again, I would like to, reiterate our thanks to both the railroads for hearing these concerns and making the adjustments to get us back on track. No pun intended. One of the other things that I would just like to, because it is about communication, and there are a lot of moving parts, and it's not only between the companies and the railroads. We had a very good, productive meeting with WYDOT concerning, the seasonal issues of keeping the highways open so that we can get not only coal miners to the coal mines, but also crews to the trains. So WYDOT is a big partner in the transportation side of things and getting things going. And we really appreciate, their partnership and their help in this as well. So, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I am done, and I would stand for questions.
Yes, you said 85 to 90% of the trains are back here. Do you know what the percentage is in the Trona patch, or is that next for Mr. Von Ahrens?
Mr. Von Ahrens, I will let him kind of speak to his company, but the feedback that I got is they're near normal. And I think in fact, the quote that I will give you from one of my members is, they're picking up everything we ask, just not necessarily on the timeframes, and there's still some hiccups, but I think it's near normal, I would say.
Thank you. Mr. Detai, if there's anything I'd ever want from you is a complete list of all the jobs that are associated with minerals in the state. You've given me the overview, but the actual study, and maybe it's our dean of business that was here earlier that helps put that together.
Yep.
But the number of jobs in the state related to minerals and energy.
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like I have a homework assignment.
Thank you. Yep. Mr. Von Ahren. Oh, we have a question for you before we leave. Sorry, Fred.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, not so much a question as just a comment. And thank you for the positive remarks, Mr. Detai. I chaired a meeting about 2 years ago where between the industry, mining industry and the railroads, it was knives out. And Mr. Detai, you were there. So hearing that we could facilitate without any legislation improvements, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Right
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Detai, has there been any inroads, rather, any progress to exporting coal on the West Coast to other countries?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question, Representative Conrad. I would say the door is maybe closed, but not locked. We are moving a little bit of coal from the Powder River Basin out of Montana, not out of Wyoming. Statistically insignificant, but we are doing it, and there's still interest in getting our coal off offshore, off the West Coast. I've had some conversations with some of our other elected officials about that. There is still interest. I mean, it would help. It would absolutely help, and it's something that we cannot stop pursuing.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Any more? Okay, let's go to Mr. Von Aaron's. I asked him this question at a fundraiser in Sweetwater County in the past week. How many people are employed by his company? He said roughly 1,000 plus. The reason I asked that because I watched all the funds that were being spent to improve healthcare in that part of the state. And I thought his company and all the companies are associated with that to make these improvements in people's health. That's just that area, let alone what they drove into the economy. And Mr. Conrad, I'll be asking you the same thing, what in the number of people your company employs. But with that, Mr. Von Aaron, let's talk trains first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Fred Von Ahrens, I'm the Vice President of Genesis Alkali Soda Ash Manufacturing outside of Green River, Wyoming. As I talked in our July meeting, Genesis Alkali has been growing for 75 years this year. And we've been doing that with the UP Railroad, and we're very proud to have been doing that. The UP Railroad just put a new CEO, Jim Vena. He took the reins in August. He met with our president, Ed Flynn, and within a week, we had approval of a project that we've been waiting for 5 years to expand our 19 track, and we're very thankful for that. He also has been making the demonstrative moves to improve the performance of the railroad, including what he calls restructuring the Union Pacific for success. And we are very optimistic about that. And as Mr. Detai said, we're seeing results. Some details, we're working, and all of industry, all of businesses are facing significant turnover of the baby boomers. And quite frankly, 10 years ago, the Union Pacific Railroad crews knew how to move around our tracks as well as we did. They have new employees, we have new employees, and that's something we're all working to overcome. To help, better documentation, better training, better planning. And that's some of the things I'm going to talk about in both the UP Railroad, and we are doing that. So we are laying out what we call inbound plans. We didn't have to do that before. We had to show them different areas where we want the trains to come in, and they are doing that, and that is helping us significantly. We are also working on scheduling. This is something we talked about at the last meetings, and Travis talked about it briefly. There really wasn't a firm schedule of when the trains would come in or they would pull our full cars. The UP in September has implemented a schedule for unit trains. That's a great start. Now, be careful what you ask for, because that means I have to have my trains ready to go when they're ready to go. But that's learning we'll both do and we'll both get better at, and it'll help us tremendously. So we appreciate that. Couple data points. I talked at the last meeting about cars that come into our facility from producers like Representative Conrad's. In times when there's a lot of cars available, we may fill them and ship them. And we have agreements like that because it's just too much trouble to break those trains apart. We could lose a whole day. Over the last 5 months, I've still had 86 cars of other producers come into my facility. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is we had a joint visit with the UP and our export ports and showed them how we are working have always worked to lay out as we load the ships for export, how we lay the different producer cars at different tracks at various ports and what information we give to their crews. And when their executives saw that, they realized that there's an opportunity for improvement there. If we're doing our part and the crews are taking the right cars from the right tracks, we will make improvements. So the fact that they went through that level of detail was really helpful and a commitment on their part for improvement. On another good note, during that visit, the joint visit, they also talked about the growth opportunities that Mr. Detai talked about and what they're doing to prepare in Southwest Wyoming for the pending growth from the industry. And if I could just speak, the one more data point I'll give, they've also had an 11% improvement to your question, Mr. Chairman, an 11% improvement in the turnaround time, cars being pulled from our facility and cars being empty, cars returning to our facility. And we're very appreciative of that. The reliability of supply and cost effectiveness is what Wyoming soda ash is known for worldwide. Over 50% of our business, 57% of mine is offshore. Our customers require that reliable delivery. In fact, many of our customers, we manage their inventory. So when their silos are getting low, they expect us to fill them. And so that's the kind of reputation Wyoming producers have to continue to grow. And my Genesis expansion, my Granger expansion just started up last week, 17% growth in my volume. That will only continue if I have reliable transportation systems. Rail, the DOT, the trucks that Travis talked about, 90% of my business goes over rail. So I'm highly dependent on it, and I'm pleased with not only the UP's commitment and to improvement and the improvement that they've made to date. And I'm also very thankful that this very important Joint Minerals Committee has taken the time to put it on your very business schedule to help us get better. So thank you.
Thank you. 90% of your product over rail. That's a big part of your business. Questions for Mr. Von Aaron? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Von Aaron's, we appreciate you, the opportunity of having you here to testify. And I know as you work to develop these massive projects for expanding capacity there in Southwest Wyoming, that, multi-billions of dollars going to be spent. There's a lot of engineering and study that goes into that, and transportation, I'm sure, is one of the major components of making a project like this economically viable. But I'm sure you worked with the railroad for quite some time to ensure reliability and everything, but it took a change in the CEO to do that. Could you tell us what the problem was before? You mentioned 5 years you were working with them, and all of a sudden you got a new CEO, and within a matter of days you got response. What changed there? Was it just the CEO? Or was there something else that changed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I would say it was the chairman. Sometimes, and my business included, it starts from the top. Performance of a business starts with the top. It starts with leadership, and that leadership needs to make sure that it is sending the right strategic message to their business on what the real focus is. In my business, it's my customers. Without customers, I do not have a business. And I believe that Mr. Vina has a very good focus on operations, and that he's getting the UP Railroad refocused on what they do best, and that's servicing their customer.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So, thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Von Aaron's. Help me to understand how the train cars get mixed up on their way back, because you assemble a train with 100+ cars, and the railroad picks that up and takes it to its destination. I'm assuming that they just keep that train together as they dump and turn it around and bring it back. Do they break them up when they get to the west coast?
Mr. Von Aaron's?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The railroad infrastructure in the Green River area is 50 years or older. And the challenge is as much to the producers as it is to the UP Railroad, to be honest with you. The Track 19 expansion I spoke of was to extend an existing track so that we can get a larger volume of rail cars on that track and make it easier to move. And to your point, Representative, not have to break them apart. The less movement that the UP crew has to do, the easier it is for them to do their job. And quite frankly, my employees as well. The problem is when we go to the ports, as you can imagine, you just don't have the space for long rail supply. And so the cars have to be broke apart and then they have to be placed back there. And that does make it complicated for our crews as well as theirs. So the more specific we could be, and we don't want to make it the easy button just to pull the cars. We need to make sure our employees and the railroad employees are meticulous about what cars, if there's only 5 cars of perhaps Tata's cars, that's what they pull. Don't pull that whole train because that just compounds the problem. And I believe the UP is going to show a video that you'll see how complex it is for them to move cars around in the yard in Green River. So the easier we make it for them, the easier it'll be for them and us. But the bottom line is the guys can't take the easy button and try to pull out a mixed train full of different producer cars and bring it back into the yard. It just compounds the situation. I hope that answered your question.
Answer your question? Good. Okay. Further questions from the committee? Further comment from you, Mr. Von Aaron or Mr. Detai? You said there's a video to be shown? No? Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr.
Appreciate it.
Chairman, thank you for the opportunity.
Good reports. Thank you. Union Pacific. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Nathan Anderson. I represent Union Pacific Railroad, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today to share a few updates, build on some of the positive momentum that Mr. Detai and Mr. Von Aaron's shared as to how Union Pacific is focused going forward on safety and service and operational excellence. And at the request of Chairman Burkhart, I did bring a video about building a train in Green River Yard, and my new best friend BJ has helped me. He's going to cut that up, so we're not going to watch a 6.5-minute video. He's going to show us a few cuts, so it's about 90 seconds or so. Go ahead, BJ. Thanks. And I'll do a little annotation. What you're seeing here is a pair of locomotives that are going to move past a switch point in the Green River Yard, and you'll see that the employee there on the right is going to throw the switch, meaning he's going to realign the tracks so that when that pair of locomotives reverses its direction, it will go to a different set of tracks. You saw him there check that they were clear of the switch point. Throwing the switch and then goes ahead and locks it. That pair of locomotives then reverses direction, goes to a different set of tracks to get cars. There you can see kind of the scope of the Green River Yard. See there, and this is what we would call our manifest train service. You can see there's different types of cars, and some of the soda ash Trona product that moves on our network moves in that manifest network, and some of it moves in more of a in the unit train aspect. here again, you see a train moving tracks that allows it to get to the car that it needs to get from the track where it's stationed to put it in the right place in the right order in the train. And it's not just an issue of any car in any order. You need to have customer cars in the train manifest together. You also want to have weight distribution is important as well. You need to have loaded cars and empty cars distributed appropriately for safe train handling. I think we have one more cut here that we'll show toward the end. As you can see with this time lapse, even building a small train of say 50 or 60 cars in the manifest yard can take an extraordinary amount of time and requires a lot of resources to do. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that when I finish my other comments, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Carry on. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to start on the western side of the state with soda ash, Trona product. We have had several months in a row of meeting the customer demand, and we're seeing increased demand right now for grain products going to the Pacific Northwest, and we are managing those accordingly with the Trona product moving in that same corridor. And we have crews and locomotives to support both businesses. We heard a little bit in the prior testimony and prior comments about the wrong car challenge. I wanted to, if I could, just elaborate a little bit about that. And I've talked to Mr. Detaille saying, if you know of a specific issue, can you give me, a date, a car number, a customer? We can go dig into that, because we're working really hard on a tactical level to say, if we know there's a problem, let's go find a solution. Let's make sure it doesn't happen again. One of the challenges that we have with the wrong car problem, or with the wrong car delivery, is that when the cars get delivered in the unit train context to the ports, to the unloading facilities, we give them to a third party. That third party has the longshore labor that unloads them. Now, they do not have what we would call a loop track or a single track for unloading. They have multiple tracks. So it looks, frankly, it looks a lot like what you saw in the video, where you have a whole bunch of cars next to each other. Well, if we bring in train one and put it on 6 tracks from one producer, and during that shift, 4 of those tracks get unloaded, and the next train that comes in, they pull the empty cars out, put them in a return track, and start with those first 4 tracks again from producer number 2. Those cars could all get billed back to the producer by the unloading facility. We have identified, as Mr. Von Ahrens and Mr. Detaille mentioned, we have identified some things we can do tactically on our side in the Portland service unit area to make sure those cars are getting back to the right location. There was also an issue that came up of loaded cars being returned to the facilities. We found some logic in our transportation infrastructure that would take a car that had been bad ordered. So meaning a car that was no longer, it was given to us by the customer and at some point no longer deemed worthy to continue on its rail journey, that it would go to get fixed. And then instead of going to destination, it would go back to origin. So it would go back with its full load. We don't want that to happen. We want it to go to the destination. So we've changed that logic. And since probably about June, we haven't seen that problem. Again, Mr. Detaille and I are talking regularly. And when his members bring those issues up to me, I'm asking for those details so I can have my customer care team look for those solutions. On a more strategic level, back in June, we started producing a monthly scorecard to the industry to enhance communication, give us common language, common data to talk about, and then address those broad issues in the industry. Company-specific issues still get handled locally and with our commercial team engaged, and so those. And if I get pulled into those, I'll help address those as well. But on the high level, those kind of industry issues are being discussed at an appropriate industry level taking into account important antitrust regulations. Now, Union Pacific has planned over the next 4 to 5 years about $450 million of investments in the soda patch to Portland and soda patch to Oakland or Northern California locations. Those dollars will be for planned expansions that will allow us to address the proposed and planned expected expansion and increased volume from the soda patch. Last month, 24th and 25th of October, we had a train trip from Green River to Portland. Executives from multiple producers as well as Union Pacific were there. The feedback I got from that train trip was overwhelmingly positive. In fact, the idea that minds were changed and understanding was achieved were shared with me. We were able to show all the sidings that are being expanded or that are planned to be expanded. And we were able to explain to the customers how that will impact directly those shipments. They will allow for more trains. It will allow for more frequent trains. It will allow for more total volume to move and for quicker return of empties as well. We showed the customers as well. They were able to see how our dispatch center in Omaha, Nebraska interacts with each train individually and how they get specific instructions. And we demonstrated that we're prepared for current volumes. The customers on the trip realized that what the capital plan means for them and it gained a technical understanding. And already several have reached out to both our CEO and the Surface Transportation Board to share their appreciation. Moving to coal. Again, on the tactical side, we have been meeting demand that our customers are presenting to us. We saw over the course of maybe the last 3 to 6 weeks a slowdown a little bit as we went into fall weather where people are neither running their air conditioners nor their heat. And we expect to see a ramp up as temperatures cool off and we head into winter. The cycle time improvements have yielded compliments from the customer base. And so when we say cycle time improvement, that number goes down. That means the same number of cars move more coal in a given period. We have, Mr. Von Ahrens mentioned a couple of challenges on the western side of the state with coal, and we are addressing those directly. We know there's been an issue of congestion as some Powder River Basin coal is going into western Wyoming to supplement production on that side of the state, and that's created some congestion versus the planned trains that were going in there previously that were just in western Wyoming. We're addressing that with our operating team locally and with our commercial team as well. On the more strategic side, we are working right now on winter weather preparedness. As Mr. Detail mentioned, we had a fantastic meeting with WYDOT and a bunch of stakeholders who are all very concerned about how Highway 59 is going to fare this winter. We know we had a very tough winter last year. We feel like we have a good working relationship with WYDOT, with the producers, and as he mentioned, getting miners to the mines and getting railroad operators to the trains is the key goal. We have mutual opportunities to support each other in that. And in fact, WYDOT's here. Scott Taylor from Region 4 is here, and we're grateful for the interaction we have with them being WYDOT, the local folks. Last year was really tough from a winter standpoint. We've talked about that. We had great relationship with WYDOT. We continue to have a great relationship, and we stand with them to say, what are the right things to do going forward is to continue to be able to continue that. I will say just in closing, on behalf of the nearly 750 Wyoming employees of Union Pacific Railroad, the men and women who move trains and take care of track and inspect and maintain. We're proud to be part of your economy. The Association of American Railroads, Mr. Chairman, recently has stated that 729 Wyoming employees yields roughly 5,832 other jobs in the peripheral economy. Thank you.
Thank you. What was the number that you're investing to accommodate the growth in the Trona Patch?
About 450 million over the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. That's a lot. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Anderson, how are you doing on staffing? We had this discussion probably about 2 years ago, and that I know that became a high priority for you and also the other railroads. How are you doing?
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Chairman Burkhart, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. We are doing very well. We are in Wyoming. We are basically fully staffed. The efforts we made in terms of incentives and opportunities have yielded positive results. And we continue to look for the best people. And I will tell you that on Monday next, we are announcing that we're kicking off a regional partnership with Laramie County Community College in focusing on areas of welding and diesel mechanic. And we think that that will not only enhance the product that they are turning out in terms of educated and trained students, but also gives exposure to many other students of career opportunities at Union Pacific Railroad. And we'll continue to work hard on those staffing solutions across the state.
Sir, are those 2-year certificates, those people that would come out of the ready to work for you?
Mr. Chairman, they will come out ready to work for us primarily as well because we do a lot of on-the-job training. We'll take someone without a degree and move them into those kinds of roles as well.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, based on your testimony, we may have been blaming you for some things that are not happening that are your fault with these rail cars that are getting mixed up. It sounds like we have a unit train that's full of Tronas, complete train, and you're transporting it down to the ports. And then the longshoremen are breaking it up down there and not getting it put back together for you to transport back this way. So it sounds like maybe the solution is for the ports to make a loop so they can just keep those trains together and we could weld the cars together because they never get separated. They get loaded here in Green River in Wyoming, taken down there and offloaded so they never have to separate it. Because based on your video, that's a tremendous amount of work to separate those trains and to take it through a switching yard. And so it'd be much more efficient if it just stayed together and you were just a transporter down to the port and transporting back. So are we falsely blaming the blame on Union Pacific for these missed cars?
Mr. Chairman, can I just say yes to all of that?
It's not that easy.
Representative Heiner, thank you for the comment and the questions. There is a lot of complexity to delivering rail service. And sometimes I'm an advocate of loop tracks. There's other aspects, things like runaround tracks. If you can't build a loop, one of the challenges with a port is that it's constrained on at least one side by water. And so you can't always build out and there may not be enough room to build a loop track just because of the acreage required. That said, we are working with the unloading contractor and their labor. We've also identified specific things that we can do to address those challenges when they do arise. So when we get cars back and we realize those are not all Genesis Alkali cars, some of them are some other producer whose names I have written down here and just blanked on. Sorry. But to answer your question, loop tracks are awesome. They're not the only solution, and sometimes they're not a possible solution just based on physical space.
Cover it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, do you have the same problems with coal trains that are loaded and then go elsewhere with coal? Are they able to stay together and so you don't mix up the cars?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Heiner, for that question. Most of the coal utilities have loop tracks at destination because of how they unload. And without speaking on behalf of the coal industry, my understanding is that their specific goal with their asset, the car tends to be turning that as fast as possible. So breaking it up into a bunch of unloading tracks takes away from that efficiency. That creates a problem. Therefore, they have invested at those utilities in the loop tracks. I won't go as far as to say welding the cars together is a good idea, because when you do need to get one out to fix it or for whatever other reason, you definitely you want the couplers to work. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Go ahead. Let's defer to her and then you. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just ask a little bit about your affirmative actions you've taken to sort of build relationships with Laramie Community College for workforce development. First of all, I applaud you in that and the effort to sort of team up with our community college system. Do you see a a possibility of expanding that to other community colleges in the Wyoming system or other areas of need for your workforce? Because I just kind of interested in that. I think that's.
Mr. Anderson, are you open to other colleges?
The opportunity that we presented, Mr. Chairman, is with LCCC. We actually talked to a couple other colleges to see if we could find the right solution. That was the first one that came up. We'd be open to talking about other with other colleges about other opportunities. It is a competitive bid process to make those regional partnerships work.
Thank you. What jobs do you need most right now?
Train, engine, and yard. So engineers, conductors, switch and brake.
They can learn to do that in 2 years, an engineer?
We will take someone who has no education other than high school diploma or a GED, and we will train them to work in those jobs. Welding, diesel mechanic, electrician, signal, those kinds of things. We will also train them. A lot of people come out of military with kinds of skills that allow them to quickly move into those jobs. However, we want to partner with those organizations like LCCC who are in areas where we're trying to hire and who have the programs already that we can enhance, and that allows us to leverage those existing relationships, those existing programs. And frankly, it also exposes other people who may not have thought about Union Pacific as a career, whether it be in welding or some other skilled trade, to expose them and their instructors to what's going on at Union Pacific and the career opportunities that are there.
Representative Western, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, thank you for your testimony. Just out of curiosity, it sounds like when you go to these ports that the way that they currently unload the product it's very just time intensive. In a perfect world, how much additional time are these is expended to use the segmentation method versus kind of that pull through? I mean, approximately how much time is it adding to the process if you had to take a guess?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Western, I am not an expert on the flow of soda ash or Trona when it flows out. I don't know how fast it flows out of the hoppers. And so I would say, but the switching adds considerable time. It's not insignificant having to switch cars in and out of the unloading tracks. It's for a 100-car train, it's got to be a couple of days versus what it would take if it was on a loop track. That's a ballpark number, but it's not insignificant.
Answer it for you. Good. Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's leave time for BNSF, but before you go, the 750 employees you have, how many of those are directly related to our mineral-based industry in Wyoming?
At some level, they all are, because we're a network, and so everything touches everything. As far as the direct number, I don't know. I could try to scour the data and see what I could figure out.
Mr. Deti is catching all that information for us, so that'll be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll circle back with him if that's all right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. BNSF, we got those folks in the room. Oh, they're on Zoom. Okay. BNSF, do you have something to say? Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead and state your name and present to us.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Matt Jones. Last name spelled Jones, and I'm Executive Director of Public Affairs for BNSF Railway. And thank you for the opportunity to participate remotely today. Sorry, I can't be there in person. But I would just like to emphasize that we appreciate the time and attention that this committee has focused on this issue. We know how important it is to the state of Wyoming and the mineral producers in Wyoming. When we spoke with this committee back in early April of this year, we committed that BNSF was dedicated to putting the resources in place to get the service to a level that our customers and Wyoming mineral producers expect. And I'm pleased to report that since May, the velocity on our coal network has been approximately 300 miles per day, which is extremely good. It's an indication of a fluid and efficient network that's operating as it should. And in fact, November month to date, our miles per day on the coal network are 318 miles per day, which is the best all year. So, with a cautious note of optimism, I think we have put the resources where they need to be in order to meet the current expectations of our customers. But as Mr. Deti and Mr. Anderson pointed out, we also need to be prepared for what may come this winter, next year, and beyond that. And so I want to in particular thank Mr. Deti and the Wyoming Mining Association and their members for the just constructive level of communications that we've had this year in order to make sure that we're getting the information from his members, and we're providing information as well in order to be in a position to adjust resources as needed when should market conditions change. Similarly, as Mr. Anderson mentioned, we've had really productive conversations with WYDOT to talk about the Highway 59 winter preparedness, and so all of those communications are extremely important to be prepared, to be able to position our resources should demand for coal or other minerals change in the coming months. So with that, I'm happy to provide or to stand by for any questions, but again, thank you for the opportunity to provide some brief comments.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Committee questions for Mr. Jones, BNSF? Okay. All right, we appreciate that. Thank you. Just as a reminder, how many people do you have employed in Wyoming with BNSF? I think you told us last winter, but I need to remember.
Approximately 800.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. All the best to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, anything else before we break for lunch? Public comment, yeah. Anybody in the room? Anybody on the internet? Okay, we're good. Committee, before we break for lunch, anything that you have to say? All right. Let's take a break for lunch. We're scheduled at 1:30 to meet with the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources for an update. Thank you, everyone.